Chapter 418. Seeing that Su Qinghui was playing dumb, Hu Jinyao went straight to the point. Who is Qingsang's biological mother? Su Qinghui was stunned. He didn't expect Hu Jinyao to ask this question. Or maybe he had guessed it, but he didn't expect Hu Jinyao to say it directly. What nonsense are you talking about? Qingsang's biological mother is Kaiping. Hu Jinyao curled his lips, and the smile on his face was sarcastic. He put down the teacup in his hand, sat up straight, and looked at Su Qinghui. Is it interesting? Hu Jinyao. Su Qinghui closed his eyes and suppressed the trace of displeasure in his heart. Is it interesting? How can you say such things in front of me? Who are you to question me? Qingsang's husband, Hu Jinyao said confidently. I don't want to see Qingsang worry, so please tell me, Dad, who is Qingsang's biological mother? No one. This was the last thing Su Qinghui wanted to talk about. I'll only say it once, no one. Really? Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qinghui and nodded hard. Actually, Dad, have you ever thought that the more you try to hide it, the more we think you're guilty? Hu Jinyao. Su Qinghui was exasperated. I'm your father-in-law. You'd better watch your attitude. Of course I know you're my father-in-law. But do you think what you've done is what a qualified father should be? When Hu Jinyao said this, his voice became quite rude. All these years, have you cared for Qingsang? All these years, have you cared for her feelings? You can't even give her an answer. What makes you think that you can be called a qualified father-in-law? Su Qinghui didn't say anything. He knew these things. But he just forced himself not to think about it. This is between me and Qingsang. It has nothing to do with you. I've also said that I'm Qingsang's husband. Her business is my business. I'll say it again. I don't have an answer to give you. You don't have an answer because you have a guilty conscience. Because you want to protect the woman you really love. Hu Jinyao's eyes were sharp. His deep eyes were like sharp swords, pointing straight at Su Qinghui's heart. Am I right? Nonsense. Su Qinghui's face turned green. Who gave you the right to make such wild guesses? Is this nonsense? Hu Jinyao sneered and stared at Su Qinghui's face. You said that you love Xiang Kaiping, but you are so cold to her daughter. To put it bluntly, it was because Qingsang was not Xiang Caiping's daughter. But whose daughter was she? Who is the other woman? Hu Jinyao thought of his previous deduction. I figured it out later. That woman should have an extraordinary family background. But it was still not enough to contend against the Li clan. In order to protect her, you treated her daughter as Xiang Caiping's daughter and raised her by your side. Right? No. Su Qinghui's defense was weak. Admit it. Your expression betrays you. Why did that woman give birth to Qingsang and not want her? Could it be that, to a large extent, her identity did not allow her to acknowledge this child? Otherwise, why would you have such an attitude? When Hu Jinyao said this, he vaguely felt that something didn't seem to make sense. However, this result was the closest to the answer after his discussion with Su Qingsang. Hu Jinyao. I said, don't talk nonsense. There is no such thing. Su Qinghui had strong self-control for so many years, but at this time, he could not help but be affected by Hu Jinyao's words. I guessed it right, so you are angry? Hu Jinyao sat up straight. Why don't you be more honest and tell me who Qingsang's biological mother is? I can promise you. We just want to know the answer. After we know, we will not destroy the other party's original life. Su Qinghui's expression was very ugly. He stared at Hu Jinyao's face, as if he wanted to burn a hole in his body. Have you said enough? If you have, please get out. In fact, have you ever thought that it is useless for you to hide it? After all, we can actually find out who the women you were in contact with back then. It just takes a little time. Hu Jinyao. Su Qinghui stood up and slammed the table. I'll say it again. Get out. Get out. Hua Jinyao did not stand up because of his anger. The expression on his face did not even change at all. He just looked at Su Qinghui, with a faint mockery in his eyes. You didn't tell me because you don't believe that I can find out? Su Qinghui did not want to listen to him anymore, nor did he want to endure it anymore. He stood up and walked in the direction of the door. Then, he quickly pulled open the door of the study. Hua Jinyao, get out. After saying this, his gaze suddenly fell on Li Qianxue, who was standing outside the door. She stood there, expressionless. He didn't know if she had just arrived or if she had been standing there for a long time. Su Qinghui's face suddenly changed like a palette that had been knocked over. It turned green, red, white, and black. Li Qianxue's expression did not change at all. She only looked at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao, what did you just say? Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes and looked at Li Qianxue. He was not sure what she would do if she knew about this. Hua Jinyao. Li Qianxue did not look at Su Qinghui at all. She just stared at Hua Jinyao. What did you just say? Say it again. There was no answer. There was no sound. The study was extremely quiet. Li Qianxue took a step forward and entered the study. Su Qinghui subconsciously raised his hand, instinctively wanting to stop Li Qianxue. However, she had already walked in and stood in front of Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao, speak. Auntie? Hua Jinyao frowned slightly. He seemed to be a little dissatisfied that he did not notice that someone was approaching and eavesdropping outside the door. It was true that he wanted to help Su Qingsang find her biological mother, but he did not want to destroy Su Qingsang's peaceful life. Su Qingsang is not Xiang Caiping's child. Then whose child is it? Li Qianxue had only heard a general idea, but she still needed more information. Tell me, who is that woman? Auntie, I don't know either. Looking at Li Qianxue's gloomy face, Hua Jinyao inexplicably felt a headache. Things seemed to be out of control. You don't know. Li Qianxue's eyes were as sharp as knives. After glancing at his face, she quickly turned and looked at Su Qinghui behind her. He doesn't know. You don't know either. Chapter 419. The atmosphere in the study was almost strange. Su Qinghui didn't move. He just watched Li Qianxue walk toward him step by step and then stand in front of him. Who is that woman? Her face was calm, without sorrow or joy. She had always thought that the person Su Qinghui loved was Xiang Caiping. He had not forgotten about her for so many years. However, other than her and Xiang Caiping, Su Qinghui had another woman. What did that mean? Li Qianxue doubted herself more than once. She doubted that her love for so many years was just a joke. However, she refused to give up. She kept thinking that it would be fine as long as she could endure it. She always thought that as long as she got through it, until Su Qinghui gave up and stopped thinking about that woman, he would always see the good in her. However, she didn't expect that she wouldn't be able to last until Su Qinghui gave up and forgot about that woman. It turned out that Su Qinghui had another woman. Su Qinghui looked at the fierce look in Li Qianxue's eyes and felt guilty again. He could only try to calm down. There's no such woman. You heard wrong. I'm not deaf. Li Qianxue looked at Su Qinghui. The sarcasm in her eyes was obvious. And you didn't close the door properly. Her voice was very calm, but one could faintly hear the anger contained in it. Su Qinghui lowered his head and avoided eye contact with Li Qianxue. There are no other women. You really misheard me. This was the first time Su Qinghui had spoken to Li Qianxue in such a low voice. His voice was full of helplessness. However, Li Qianxue only pretended to be guilty and tried to cover up. She took a step forward and stood in front of Su Qinghui. Her body was less than 10 centimeters away from him. She stared into his eyes. Su Qinghui. Who was Su Qingsang's mother? Who else could it be if not Xiang Kaiping? No one. No one. Are you reproducing asexually? You conjured a child out of thin air. Li Qianxue was utterly disappointed in Su Qinghui. For more than 20 years, she had loved him until she was powerless and exhausted. Now, she was desperate and disappointed. He was truly disappointed. I told you. There are no other women. Li Qianxue stared at Su Qinghui's face. She closed her eyes and asked again, who is Su Qingsang's mother? Tell me. Hua Jinyao didn't expect things to turn out like this. As the son-in-law of Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui, it was obviously not suitable for him to stay any longer. He glanced at Su Qinghui and then at Li Qianxue. Although the two of them did not speak, the atmosphere was tense. He didn't even say goodbye to Su Qinghui and quietly left the study. Downstairs, Su Qingsang was still waiting for him to give her an answer. Hua Jinyao looked at her and shook his head almost imperceptibly. Su Qingsang understood. The two of them said goodbye to old Master Li and left. Su Yusen looked at Hua Jinyao's face and instinctively told him that something bad had happened. In the study, Li Qianxue was still questioning Su Qinghui. However, no matter what, Su Qinghui would not admit it, let alone tell Li Qianxue the answer. I said, there is no other woman. You heard wrong. Li Qianxue didn't want to ask anymore. She raised her hand and almost slapped him in the face. Su Qinghui's face was slapped away by her. He looked at Li Qianxue and moved his lips, but he didn't say a word. Li Qianxue suddenly smiled. She looked at Su Qinghui and smiled while nodding heavily. Su Qinghui. Let's get a divorce. This was the second time Li Qianxue mentioned the word divorce. Su Qinghui was stunned for a moment and instinctively refused. I don't agree. It doesn't matter whether you agree or not. Li Qianxue stopped smiling. Her voice was full of exhaustion. It's me now. I have decided to divorce you. Su Qinghui, listen carefully. I want to divorce you. I don't agree. Su Qinghui's voice finally sounded normal. He looked at Li Qianxue with a determined expression. Don't think about it. It's impossible for me to divorce you. Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue gritted her teeth and looked at Su Qinghui. Don't be too shameless. What makes you think that after you betrayed me again and again, I can still be with you without any grudge? I didn't betray you. Su Qinghui knew that Li Qianxue wouldn't believe anything he said at this time, but it was the truth. You didn't betray me. Then where did Su Qingsang come from? Not only did you betray me, but you also betrayed Xiang Kaiping. Su Qinghui. I always thought that you loved Xiang Kaiping. It's been more than 20 years. You pretended to be affectionate, tortured me, and ignored me. I really thought that you were so noble. What a gentleman. So what happened? It turned out that he was just a scumbag, and she spent half of her life for a scumbag. Su Qinghui, I'll say it again. I want a divorce. I'm going to tell my father now. Li Qianxue turned around and was about to leave, but Su Qinghui grabbed her arm. Li Qianxue was caught off guard, and her body was surrounded by Su Qinghui. He looked at the determination on Li Qianxue's face and inexplicably panicked. In order to hide his emotions, Su Qinghui said without thinking, Li Qianxue, I won't divorce you. Why did you get to marry me when you wanted to, and now divorce me when you want to? Dream on. Besides, are you sure you want to divorce now? Su Qinghui looked at her face and said casually, who has been in charge of the Li group all these years? Tell me. What's more, your father's health isn't very good. The doctor said that he can't be agitated. Are you sure you want to tell your father? Su Qinghui, you're despicable. Li Qianxue was furious. She almost wanted to slap Su Qinghui again. Yes, I'm despicable. I also know that I'm despicable. But this despicable man, didn't you want him for yourself? Didn't you love him? Admit it, Li Qianxue. He provoked me first. It was you. He restrained her hand. Su Chenghui was a man. How could she really succeed again? So, I'm going to spend the rest of my life to atone for forcing you to marry me, right? Li Qianxue's voice was already out of control. She stared at Su Chenghui in disbelief. So this man actually thought that way. Su Chenghui wanted to say that he didn't mean that, but he thought of Su Qingsang and Su Peijian. He couldn't argue. In the end, his voice lowered. Li Qianxue, you can make a bigger fuss. Let's see if your father and Yusin will be moved. Su Chenghui knew very well where Li Qianxue's bottom line was. Li Qianxue pushed him hard and took a step back. Su Chenghui, I was really blind back then. After saying this, she didn't say anything else. She turned around and left without looking back. She didn't even look at him out of the corner of her eye. After she left, Su Chenghui took a few steps back weakly and leaned against the desk as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out. His back was covered in a layer of cold sweat. He didn't care about Li Qianxue's anger. He only knew that the secret between Su Peijian and Su Qingsang was temporarily kept. However, he didn't know how long this secret could be kept. Sitting in the car, Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jinyao. He told Su Qingsang about the conversation in the study just now. Su Qingsang frowned as she thought about Su Chenghui's words. He said there's no that woman. He really knows how to cover up his scummy behavior. Even though Su Chenghui was her biological father, Su Qingsang had some resentment towards him now. How could there be such a person? He dared to do it but didn't dare to admit it. Hu Jinyao didn't say anything. He thought about everything that had happened since Yang Kaiping appeared. He felt that something was wrong. Su Qingsang was still guessing the identity of her biological mother. Seeing that Hu Jinyao didn't say anything, she stopped talking. It was the new year, and she was a little depressed. Because of Su Chenghui's hiding and Su Chenghui's scum. Hu Jinyao, do you think we might have guessed wrong? Is it possible that my mother isn't actually a rich young lady? Is it possible that she's just an ordinary person with a mediocre status? Hu Jinyao's thoughts were interrupted by her. He turned his head and looked at her. What do you mean? For example, a prostitute or, Su Qingsang didn't know why she thought that way. I thought about it. I don't think my father could have sex with a third woman in that situation. The most likely reason is that he wanted Auntie Hua and my mother at the same time, so he had an accident when he was out. The so-called accident was actually something like a one-night stand. Su Qingsang didn't want to think about her father in that way, but the situation in front of her was the most likely reason. Then my mother's child happened to have an accident. So my dad brought me back to the Su family. There was a red light in front of them. After Su Qingsang said this possibility, she turned to look at Hu Jinyao, waiting for his approval. Hu Jinyao frowned slightly. He was still thinking about the series of things that had happened since Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping met. He always felt that Su Qingsang's background wasn't as simple as she thought. There must be more to it. On the surface, there seemed to be no problem with Su Qingsang's background, but many details couldn't stand up to scrutiny. He always felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Until he heard about Su Qingsang's identity. Those 4 words seemed to be like a bolt of lightning, cutting through all the problems that he couldn't figure out. He suddenly turned to look at Su Qingsang. His eyes were burning as he stared at Su Qingsang's face. He thought of Su Peijian. She didn't look like Su Chenghui or Li Qianxue. But Su Yusin looked very much like Su Chenghui. Looking at Su Qingsang, if he looked carefully, Su Qingsang and Su Yusin looked more like a brother and sister when they stood together. They both perfectly inherited the advantages of Su Chenghui's facial features. Especially Su Qingsang. If she was the complete female version of Su Qinghui, her facial features would be at most elegant. However, Su Qingsang's eyebrows and eyes were like Su Qinghui's, but the shape of her face was Li Qianxue. Hu Jinyao. What's wrong? The light in front of them was already green, and the horns behind them kept blaring. Su Qingsang looked at him with some worry. Do you think I'm wrong? If not, then so be it. Anyway, it's fine now. No. You're not wrong. But we guessed wrong. Chapter 420. What? The loudspeaker behind her was still blaring. Su Qingsang was a little anxious. Hu Jinyao, don't think about it. Hurry up and drive. Hu Jinyao started the car and drove away from the intersection, but his voice was much firmer than before. Honey, I think I might know who your birth mother is. Who? Li Qianxue. Right, why didn't he think of that? It was entirely possible. What did you say? Su Qingsang's eyes widened. For a moment, she looked at Hu Jinyao as if he were a lunatic. Are you crazy? I'm not crazy. Hu Jinyao was unprecedentedly calm. It's your father who's crazy. Su Qingsang thought about what he had just said. That's impossible. Honey, listen to me. Hu Jinyao stopped the car by the side of the road. He turned to look at her with burning eyes. Look, it's entirely possible. Looking at Su Qingsang's incredulous face, Hu Jinyao put his hands on her shoulders. First, your birthdays are only one day apart from Su Peixian's. Yes, Su Qingsang knew that, but that didn't mean that she was, look. If your father really hated Li Qianxue that much back then. If he hates her so much for forcing him to marry her, he will definitely think of revenge. He had known Su Qinghui for a long time, so he had more or less seen through him. He had the ability, and he didn't particularly care about external things like face. However, there was an air of arrogance about him. He had seen the direction of the Li Group's business in the past few years. Su Qinghui disdained anything that crossed the line. This was also the reason why the Chou family was able to suppress the Su family even though they were clearly inferior to them in the past. That was because Qiu Yanba's father was more ruthless than Su Qinghui. But Su Qinghui was different. He had a bottom line and a sense of pride. He wasn't willing to use some methods that he didn't think were worth mentioning. Because of this, two very important projects of the Li Corporation were later taken away by their enemies. That was why Su Qinghui was willing to marry into the Qiu family. But how? Your father won't do anything that's against the law. She was already married. With a child. Start with the company. In the beginning, he didn't have that ability, and when he had the ability, he didn't bother to do it. If you were your father, what would you do? Su Qingsang blinked, thinking about what Hu Jinyao had said. She understood the first sentence he said. But every sentence put together, she was unwilling to believe it. I don't believe it. This was impossible. If her biological mother was Li Qianxue, then what about Su Peixian? Who is Su Peixian? That's my point. Hu Jinyao thought about the information he had gathered from his initial investigation. I think your mother, Xiang Kaiping, had a premature birth and gave birth to you half a month early. However, Li Qianxue also gave birth at this time. I think something might have happened to Li Qianxue when she was giving birth. At the very least, Old Master Li was definitely not in Lin City. Because of these unexpected events, your father decided to do something very daring. You and Su Peixian will be swapped. Su Qingsang was speechless. No, that's impossible. Is my father crazy? He is crazy. Hu Jinyao thought about Su Qinghui's mentality from a man's perspective. Think about it. Li Qianxue stole Xiang Caiping's man, but your father doesn't love her. In order to take revenge on her, in order not to break the law. So it's very likely that he did this. Su Qingsang still couldn't accept it. It was too crazy. He took you away and gave Su Peijian to Li Qianxue, so that Li Qianxue would treat the woman she hated as her own child. Think about it, what could be more ruthless than this? Su Qingsang's mind was blank. She didn't want to believe it. But every word Hu Jinyao said made her unable to refute. Afraid that Su Qingsang still didn't understand, Hu Jinyao said directly, give Xiang Caiping's child to Li Qianxue and raise Li Qianxue's child as an illegitimate daughter. For Li Qianxue, this is the greatest and deepest revenge. Su Qingsang lost the ability to speak. Her voice was stuck in her throat, and she couldn't say a word. I can even guess that after Xiang Caiping came back, she had a conflict with Su Peijian. Su Qinghui rushed here not to stand up for Su Peijian, but to tell her the reason. Su Qingsang recalled what Su Qinghui said in the hospital that day. Do you know, actually, Qingsang isn't what? At that time, she only guessed that she wasn't Xiang Caiping's child. But she never thought that she might be Li Qianxue's child. Who in their right mind would do such a thing? Who would think of such a way? He must have wanted to tell Xiang Caiping more than once, but he resisted in the end. Why? Thinking about Su Qinghui she saw today, he had been denying that he had other women. At this moment, Hu Jinyao believed him. Su Qinghui really didn't have other women. In fact, Su Qinghui had an excellent reputation in the circle. He was self-disciplined, calm, elegant, and never messed around outside. He would go home early when he had social engagements. Many people outside said that Li Qianxue was amazing. No wonder her surname was Li. Her husband was loyal to her. Now it seemed that this request was not another means of revenge for Su Qinghui. For your father, it's not time for him to enjoy the fruits of victory yet. He won't tell Xiang Caiping and Li Qianxue about the truth. Because he wants to wait until the end. End? Su Qingsang stared at Hu Jinyao with her eyes wide open. She understood everything he wanted to say, but she still didn't understand the last point. What end? It's not the time to say it. Hu Jinyao thought about the situation today. Su Qinghui was still holding back, so for him, it was definitely not the time to say it. He might want to wait until the day Li Qianxue gets old. Or... Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang and said another possibility, Su Peijian got the Li family's property. Everything of the Li family will eventually fall into Su Peijian's hands. That will be the time for your father to tell the truth. Su Qingsang listened to all of Hu Jinyao's speculation and analysis. She stared at him with her eyes wide open, and her whole body was in a state of emptiness. Is he crazy? He's not crazy. Hu Jinyao gave Su Qingsang a very definite answer. I think not only is he not crazy, but he is also sober and knows what he is doing. Su Qingsang pursed her lips into a straight line. She looked at the street in the distance, a little confused. It had been sunny for a few days before the new year, but it was cloudy this morning. At this time, the sky was completely gloomy, as if it was going to rain. She turned her face to look at Hu Jinyao. If what you said is true, if I am really Li Qianxue's daughter, then Su Peijian is, yes. Hu Jinyao nodded and gave her a definite answer. Su Qingsang felt weak. She leaned against the car seat and was lost in thought again. She thought of the two conflicts between Xiang Caiping and Su Peijian. She also thought of Xiang Caiping making things difficult for Su Qingsang to protect her. If what Hu Jinyao said was true, then wasn't Xiang Caiping making things difficult for her own daughter to protect Li Qianxue's daughter? She instinctively stood on Xiang Caiping's side, but then she thought of Li Qianxue. What did Li Qianxue do wrong? When Xiang Caiping left, it could be said that she gave up her daughter. But what about Li Qianxue? She had taken care of Su Peijian since she was born. Take good care of her. Give her the best of everything. If Li Qianxue found out that the daughter she had loved and taken care of for so many years was not her biological daughter, what would she do? What about Xiang Caiping? Although Xiang Kaiping had not taken care of her daughter for more than 20 years. But if she found out that the daughter she had been protecting was Li Qianxue's child, what would she do? Su Qingsang didn't dare to think about it. She didn't speak, and Hu Jinyao was not in a hurry. He kept looking at her, as if waiting for her decision. Hu Jinyao, what should I do? It's up to you. Hu Jinyao took her hand into his own and wrapped it tightly around his own. When he found that her hand was cold, he frowned and said, if you want to acknowledge Li Qianxue, let's go back to the Su family now and tell them the truth. That's it. What else? Hu Jinyao rubbed her palm and supported her. As long as you want it, it's that simple. But, Su Qingsang couldn't convince herself. She couldn't accept it so easily and believe it. What if I'm wrong? There's a 90% chance. Hu Jinyao had just thought about everything. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the correct answer. But, Su Qingsang was still a little hesitant. What if Li Qianxue doesn't believe it, or Su Chenghui doesn't admit it? It's simple. Hu Jinyao could see that Su Qingsang didn't believe the answer herself. If Su Chenghui doesn't admit it, we'll do a paternity test. A paternity test was the best proof of the result. They all knew that. As long as the paternity test was out, Su Chenghui couldn't deny it even if he wanted to. Then, what if the test results show that I'm not Li Qianxue's daughter? That doesn't matter. Hu Jinyao squeezed her delicate hand. You're already so big anyway. You don't need Li Qianxue or Su Chenghui. If they want to admit it, they can admit it. If they don't want to admit it, they won't lose anything. But he was sure and confident. Su Qingsang and Su Peijian were more than 90% likely to be swapped. He made it sound simple, but Su Qingsang knew that things weren't that simple. Well, even if it's true. Even if everything you said is true. What about my mother? What about my mother? The mother she was talking about was naturally Kaiping. Speaking of Xiang Kaiping, even Hu Jinyao fell silent. To put it bluntly, he and Su Qingsang were the same. They didn't care much about the Su family. They had the relationship they had now just to maintain their appearances. But Xiang Kaiping was different. She sincerely regarded Su Qingsang as her own daughter. She also sincerely wanted to make up for the lost mother-daughter relationship in the past. Chapter 421. Could she accept it? What would she do? Would Xiang Kaiping accept Su Peijian as her daughter, or would she be disappointed that Su Qingsang wasn't her daughter? The atmosphere in the car was very quiet. Su Qingsang thought about how Xiang Kaiping had taken care of her for the past few months. She really couldn't calmly acknowledge Li Qianxue. Firstly, after so many years, they hadn't developed any feelings for each other. The second reason was for Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping was still lying on the hospital bed, almost paralyzed. By the way, Su Peijian was also the one who caused Xiang Kaiping to end up like this. If one day, he really revealed the truth and Xiang Kaiping found out that the person who hurt her was her own daughter, how sad would she be? All of these were the reasons why Su Qingsang didn't want to expose them. She could ignore Su Chenghui, Li Qianxue, and the feelings of the other members of the Su family. However, after spending a few months together, she had no choice but to pay attention to Kaiping. She couldn't bear to hurt Xiang Kaiping. She couldn't do it. Hu Jinyao was still looking at her, waiting for her answer. Su Qingsang sighed in her heart. What other answer could there be? What other answer did he need? Let's go. Let's go to the hospital. Hu Jinyao wasn't surprised by Su Qingsang's words at all. If she could reconcile with Li Qianxue so easily, she wouldn't be Su Qingsang. All right. Let's go to the hospital. Hu Jinyao. The moment he started the car, Su Qingsang suddenly spoke. He stopped to look at her and saw that she was still staring at the road ahead. Let's put an end to this matter. Wife. My mother is Xiang Kaiping. There's no Li Qianxue or anyone else. There's no revenge, and there's no conspiracy. Hu Jinyao was stunned for a moment. He was not surprised that Su Qingsang had made this decision. However, he also knew that this was a difficult decision. But she still did it, and in such a short period of time. Wife. Do you really know what you're giving up? Everything of the Li family, everything of the Su family. She was an honorable young lady. Not to mention anything else, because of the recent cooperation with the Tianyu region, the Li clan was now faintly superior to the Qiu clan. The stock price kept rising, and so did the company's market value. Su Qingsang gave up without a second thought. I know. Su Qingsang turned to look at him. I know what I've given up. I have no regrets. Without Li Qianxue, she still had Xiang Kaiping. Without the Li family, she still had Hu Jinyao. She didn't need too many things like money. Yes or no, it was all the same to her. Hu Jinyao reached out and pulled her into his arms. He hugged her tightly. Let's go. Otherwise, it would be too late. Mom will be worried if she keeps waiting. All right. Hu Jinyao let go of her hand and went to start the car. Su Qingsang looked at the scenery outside the car window and thought of a scene from her childhood. Su Peijian was held by Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue kept calling her baby. At that time, she longed for it very much. She really wanted to let Li Qianxue hug her like that. However, Li Qianxue gave her a cold look and put on a completely different expression than when she was facing Su Peijian. She said, I'm not your mother. At that time, she was sad, but she didn't hate Li Qianxue at all. The older she grew, the more she understood, and the less she hated Li Qianxue. She even faintly sympathized with her. No woman would be willing to raise a child that her husband had with someone else, not to mention that this child was under her nose every day. She had never hated Li Qianxue. Even when she came to the hospital to cause trouble for her last time, she didn't. She tried to understand Li Qianxue's situation again and empathize with her hard work. Wasn't this a kind of mother-daughter relationship? Su Qingsang's head hurt a little. She knew that no matter how much she doubted Hu Jinyao's words on the surface, deep down, she had already believed it. Because she was with Xiang Kaiping, no matter how she looked for or how she got along with her. She was touched and grateful, but she didn't have the kind of intimacy that came from the depths of her heart. However, she once had that kind of feeling for Li Qianxue. When she was young, she always wanted to get close to Li Qianxue for no reason. Even if Li Qianxue kept giving her a cold shoulder. She always tried her best. At that time, Su Peijian's sarcastic words were indeed true to her. She used to really want Li Qianxue to give her some care and some love. In the past, she only thought that she envied Su Peijian for having a mother, but why didn't she think about asking for Su Qinghui's attention? Su Qingsang closed her eyes and thought of another thing. Since Li Qianxue didn't know, she would let her not know. She would let her treat Su Peijian as her own daughter and continue like this. Otherwise, if she knew, she would probably break down. As for Su Qinghui, she naturally had a way to make him shut up and not say anything. What are you thinking about? Nothing. Su Qingsang shook her head. When she met Hu Jinyao's somewhat worried gaze, she sighed faintly and said, Hu Jinyao, I think, since Li Qianxue doesn't know, let her not know. Since she had decided to let everything go on like this, she would even hide it from Li Qianxue. It's also a good choice to let her live her life without knowing anything. This was a repayment to Li Qianxue for bringing her into this world. Hu Jinyao understood what she meant. While driving, he reached out and held Su Qingsang's hand. Okay. Thank you, Hu Jinyao. The word, thank you, is too light. Why don't you give yourself to me tonight as a thank you gift? Okay. Su Qingsang didn't refuse. She also needed Hu Jinyao. She needed something to make her forget the shock she had experienced today. When they arrived at the hospital, Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao didn't reveal anything. In fact, it was the easiest thing to hide from Xiang Kaiping. As usual, they talked and laughed to make Xiang Kaiping happy. When she was tired and wanted to sleep, they said goodbye and went home. Xiang Caiping's body was recovering well. After the Lantern Festival, she could be discharged from the hospital. At that time, she only needed to come back for regular checkups and do good rehabilitation. Su Qingsang got into the car, and the smile on her face was gone. She was in a daze all the way home. When she entered the door, she finally reached out and hugged Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao, I feel terrible. She could let everything stay the way it was. She could not recognize Li Qianxue and could continue to treat Xiang Kaiping as her own mother. But all of this couldn't hide the pain and discomfort in her heart. Hu Jinyao didn't say anything. He held her slender body tightly in his arms. If you want to cry, you can cry. No. You can't cry when you're really upset. Su Qingsang closed her eyes. She felt her eyes were wet and hot, but she didn't want to cry. How could he do this? How could he do this? If he didn't want me, he could have asked her to abort me. If he really wanted to take revenge, he could have not married her. She didn't say it clearly, but Hu Jinyao knew that she was referring to Li Qianxue. But he married her, and then he treated her like this. We can hide everything. But I really suddenly feel that. She's so pitiful. Some things couldn't stand thinking about. When Su Qingsang was with Xiang Kaiping, she could still maintain a smile on her face. But when they separated, she only felt terrible. He's so cruel. Su Qingsang tightened her grip on Hu Jinyao's shirt. She used a lot of force. How could he be so cruel? Hu Jinyao didn't know what he could say. In fact, he also looked down on Su Chenghui and couldn't forgive him for what he did. Didn't he think that if she found out one day, she would break down and go crazy? Or, he knew it, but he still did it. Hu Jinyao, I didn't hate him before. But now, I really hate him. Really. She didn't mind that Su Chenghui didn't like her, ignored her, or treated her coldly. She just thought that she was unlucky. But if she was really Li Qianxue's daughter, then Su Chenghui was really cruel. His actions were the most vicious revenge in the world for a proud person like Li Qianxue. I really hate him. Hu Jinyao, do you understand? I hate him. Hu Jinyao pressed his chin against the top of her head and kissed her hair. Don't think about it. Really. Don't think about it. If she finds out, what will she do? This was not only because Li Qianxue was her biological mother, but also because he couldn't bear to stand in the shoes of a woman. Honey, don't think about it. Hu Jinyao lowered his head to kiss her. Haven't you already decided? Then don't think about it. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang raised her head and put her arms around his neck. Kiss me. She didn't want to think about it anymore. She wanted to forget everything that had happened before. She wanted to forget everything. Okay. Hu Jinyao picked her up and gave her a deep kiss. At the same time, he carried her back to the room. It was an extremely passionate night. Su Qingsang forgot everything in this entanglement. No matter how deep the night was, it couldn't stop the arrival of dawn. When Su Qingsang opened her eyes, she felt her body ache. At the same time, everything surged into her heart like a tide. She looked at the time. It was almost 10 o'clock. She was on duty on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. She didn't need to go to work today. Normally, she should be up to see Xiang Kaiping now. But Su Qingsang suddenly had an urge to see Li Qianxue. She quickly got up, washed up, and walked out of the room. Hu Jinyao was already out. There was a note left by him on the dining table. There was breakfast prepared by him in the kitchen. She just needed to heat it up and eat it. Su Qingsang hurriedly ate a few mouthfuls, then took her bag and went out. In fact, she didn't know what she could do when she saw Li Qianxue. Chapter 422. Su Qingsang suddenly stopped when the car arrived at the Su family's villa. So what if he saw it? So what if it was confirmed? It had already been decided. Looking at it again would only increase her sadness. What if it wasn't true? What if all of Hu Jinyao's deductions were wrong? Thinking of this, Su Qingsang wanted to turn around and leave quickly. Sister. Su Yusin suddenly appeared. He stood by the car and knocked on Su Qingsang's window. Why are you here? Su Qingsang bit her lip and couldn't speak for a long time. What do you want? Are you going home? Su Yusin was referring to the Su mansion. Su Qingsang shook her head instinctively. When she saw Su Yusin's surprised look, she nodded again. Yes, I'm here for you. For me? Su Yusin raised his eyebrows. There was obvious confusion in his eyes. What do you want? It's nothing. Su Qingsang smiled awkwardly. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw her bag on the passenger seat, and her eyes lit up. Last time I went to Japan, I bought you a gift. I didn't have a chance to give it to you. Yesterday, I forgot. So. As she spoke, she took out the gift from her bag, got out of the car, and put it in Su Yusin's hand. You came to give this? Su Yusin looked at the box in his hand. He was obviously surprised. Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. She rarely lied, but this time she had to. For a moment, she looked a little uncomfortable. Su Yusin didn't think about it. He didn't open the gift. Looking at the box, he felt very touched. Thank you, sister. You're welcome. Su Qingsang glanced at him and said casually, Why are you alone? Where's Dad? He went out to give New Year's greetings. Then, where's Auntie? Su Qingsang asked more casually. It sounded like she was just chatting. She went to the United States. Ah. Went to the United States. Su Qingsang was stunned, obviously a little surprised. Yes. Su Yusin pointed to the car not far behind him, which had just driven into the Su mansion. I just drove my mother to the airport. She went to the United States to see my sister. He was referring to Su Peijian, of course. Su Qingsang nodded. She didn't know what to feel. Su Peijian, how is she? It's all right. Actually, it wasn't good at all. How good could it be to be alone outside and not be able to come back for the new year? Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. Wasn't Su Qinghui the one to blame for Su Peijian's poor life? She couldn't say it out loud. Auntie, didn't you go there before the new year? Su Yusin was a little surprised that Su Qingsang had asked about Li Qianxue twice today. However, he didn't think too much about it. I don't know. After you left yesterday, my mom started packing. Then he said he wanted to go to America to see my sister. In fact, Su Yusin didn't know what had happened. However, he could guess that it had something to do with Su Qinghui. However, as a child, it was not appropriate for him to question Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui went to someone else's house early in the morning to wish them a happy new year. He had actually thought about going to the United States with Li Qianxue to look for Su Peijian. After all, he was still on vacation. However, he didn't expect that Li Qianxue didn't want to take him. Instead, she asked him to stay at home to accompany old Master Li. I see. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. She probably knew why Li Qianxue was in a bad mood yesterday. She had always thought that Su Qinghui just didn't love her. She didn't expect that he had another woman. This should be a relatively big blow to Li Qianxue, right? Sister. Seeing that Su Qingsang was distracted again, Su Yusin couldn't help but ask again. Su Qingsang smiled. It's okay. I was just chatting. Since Dad and Auntie are not at home, I'll leave first. You're not staying for dinner? No need. Su Qingsang turned to leave. Before she left, she looked at Su Yusin and suddenly stopped. Yusin, you're going to take the college entrance examination this year, right? Yes. Good luck. Don't worry. I will. His grades had always been good. He didn't have to worry about his studies. That's good. Su Qingsang looked at Su Yusin. When she met his somewhat inexplicable gaze, she uncomfortably took a step back. Then, I'll leave first. As she said this, her eyes suddenly looked at the top of Su Yusin's head. Hey! What is this? What? Lower your head. There seems to be something dirty on your head. When Su Qingsang spoke, she motioned for Su Yusin to lower his head. Su Yusin didn't think much about it. There were children outside setting off firecrackers just now. He might have bumped into it. The moment he lowered his head, Su Qingsang reached out and pinched a hair in front of her and gently pulled it. Okay. She pinched the hair tightly and smiled at Su Yusin. I saw wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't hurt you, did I? No. Even though Su Yusin felt that this sister was strange today, for the sake of her coming to pray, he didn't want to care about anything. It's good that you're fine. Su Qingsang waved her hand. Then, I'll leave first. Okay. Su Qingsang got in the car and watched Su Yusin wave at her, then go forward to the Su house. She pinched the strand of hair and carefully took out a piece of tissue from her bag to wrap it up. Su Qingsang closed her eyes. There were some things, even if she didn't want to say it, she hoped that there would be a result. Su Qingsang was about to start the car when she suddenly thought of something. Even if Su Yusin and she were not siblings of the same father and mother, half of their DNA would be similar. So this couldn't be counted. What should she do? Closing her eyes, Su Qingsang still drove the car into the Su house. Old Master Li and Su Yusin were already sitting in the living room talking. They were talking about Li Qianshue's trip to the United States. They were a little surprised to see Su Qingsang enter the door. Su Qingsang endured the awkwardness and greeted them. She used the excuse that she had something to take from her room upstairs and turned to go upstairs. Su Yusin really felt that Su Qingsang was not normal today, so he wanted to follow her to see, but Old Master Li asked about Li Qianxue again. Su Yusin was a little slow, but Su Qingsang took the opportunity to go upstairs and go to Su Chenghui and Li Qianshue's room. It wasn't the 7th day of the Lunar New Year, so there weren't many servants in the Su family. Most of them were on vacation. She didn't have to worry about not being able to find Li Qianshue's hair. On Su Chenghui and Li Qianshue's pillows, she successfully found 2 strands of hair, one long and one short. Carefully arranging the 2 strands of hair, Su Qingsang quickly left the room. She went to Su Chenghui's study again. At this time, she was really grateful to Su Chenghui for being so at ease with his family. The door wasn't locked at all. She also found Li Qianxue and Su Chenghui's medical reports in the bottom drawer of the study. Su Chenghui was type B. But Li Qianxue was type AB. Su Qingsang also saw the other 2 medical reports. One was Su Yusin's, who was also type AB. The other was Su Peixian's, who was type B. Putting the 4 medical reports back in the drawer, Su Qingsang felt that even if she didn't do a paternity test now, she would be able to guess the result. Su Chenghui was type B, and Xiang Kaiping was type O. Children born from the combination of type B and type O blood. They were either type O or type B. Therefore, Xiang Kaiping couldn't give birth to her, but she could give birth to Su Peixian. Su Peixian was type B, which happened to be the same blood type as Su Chenghui. This was also the reason why Li Qianxue didn't suspect or suspect anything for so many years. And Su Yusin was type AB. Just like her, he had inherited Li Qianshue's blood type. Su Qingsang finished reading and left in a hurry. At the stairs, she happened to meet Su Yusin, who came up to see what was wrong with her. Sister, did you find what you were looking for? Do you need help? No need. Su Qingsang shook her head. I didn't find it. Maybe I remembered wrongly. Is it very important? Do you want me to help you? No need. Su Qingsang shook her head. You stay with the old master. I have something to do, so I have to go. Su Yusin only felt that Su Qingsang was acting strange today. He didn't think too much about it. Finally, he thought of another thing. Could it be that Su Qingsang was wronged by Hu Jinyao? She wanted to ask her family to stand up for her, but was embarrassed. Thinking about it carefully, it was really possible. Su Yusin thought about it and decided to find a chance to ask. Even if Li Qianxue didn't recognize Su Qingsang, he had already regarded her as his sister. Su Qingsang didn't know that Su Yusin had a big misunderstanding because of her strangeness. She was anxious to go for the new year after she got the hair, so the paternity test center naturally didn't work. But Su Qingsang had special channels. She used to have a medical school classmate who ended up working at the paternity test center. She called that classmate, then hurriedly took the strand of hair and went to find her classmate. A paternity test didn't necessarily have to be a father and son, or a mother and daughter. If the two people doing the test on Tiananmen Square were brothers and sisters, it could also be tested. When she went to the paternity test center, her classmate was already there. Su Qingsang gave the hair of Li Qianxue and Su Chenghui to her classmate. Finally, she pulled out 2 hairs from her own hair. She put them together with Su Chenghui's and Li Qianxue's. Please do a paternity test for me. What's wrong? Her friend took the 2 hairs and began to note her information. After so many years, you suddenly found out that you were picked up by your parents. Are you a little tadpole looking for its mother today? Su Qingsang wasn't in the mood to fool around with her. This name is my father. This is my aunt. Now that she said that she is my mother, I'm actually willing to believe them, but I still want to make sure. So, please. Okay. I know what to do. Her classmate marked it and glanced at Su Qingsang. Come back in a week to get the results. That long? Her classmate laughed. Okay. I'm just kidding. Other people need a week. You can come back tomorrow. Okay. Thank you. Su Qingsang's heart didn't relax because of her classmate's words. Instead, she felt that her heart couldn't calm down. Chapter 423. The time of the day passed quickly and slowly at the same time. Su Qingsang was peeling an apple for Xiang Kaiping in the ward. Xiang Kaiping watched her and spoke carefully. Qingsang, have you been too tired lately? Su Qingsang paused for a moment. She peeled the apple and looked at Xiang Kaiping. How come? I'm not tired. I don't have many days to rest. I'm a little conflicted. I know you've been working hard. Actually, you can take advantage of these few days to rest. Xiang Kaiping really felt that her daughter and son-in-law were too tired to take care of her every day. You can go out with Hu Jinyao when you're free. You don't have to worry about me. With Xiao Ning and Xiao Yu taking turns to take care of her, she didn't feel that she needed her daughter's company. Mom. I'm fine. I'm not tired. Su Qingsang cut the apple into slices, picked up a piece with a toothpick, and put it in front of Xiang Kaiping. Don't think so much. Xiang Kaiping took the apple. There was a smile and gratitude in her eyes. Su Qingsang looked at Xiang Kaiping with a complicated gaze. She knew very well that Su Chenghui's craziness was most likely real. She and Su Peijian might really have been switched by the dragon and phoenix. How could Xiang Kaiping not think too much? She wasn't the one who raised Su Qingsang. The mother and daughter met halfway. To be serious. It could be said that they had no feelings. But now that Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao had done so much for her, Xiang Kaiping was already very touched. Naturally, she wouldn't ask for more. Mom. Su Qingsang knew what she was thinking just by looking at her. Do you think that I recognized you as my daughter halfway through? Are you afraid that I don't want to take care of you? How could that be? Xiang Kaiping smiled a little awkwardly. But in fact, Su Qingsang could see that she might really think that way. Mom. Su Qingsang didn't say anything else after that. Xiang Kaiping looked at her as if she didn't understand why she wanted to say something. What's wrong? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. I just often think that I'm so lucky. I picked up such a good mother so easily. Tell me, what if you're mistaken? I'm not your daughter. Su Qingsang didn't finish her sentence. She said it half-jokingly, which was much easier to cover up than if she said it seriously. What nonsense are you talking about? Xiang Kaiping was unhappy to hear this. In my heart, you are my daughter. My biological daughter. Mom. Xiang Caiping's words put Su Qingsang at ease. She squeezed Xiang Caiping's palm and said, yes. That was right. I'm your biological daughter. The mother and daughter started to laugh. Xiao Ning saw this scene when she came in. She also relaxed a lot. In the morning, Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang when he got up. Do you need me to go with you? When Su Qingsang came back yesterday, she told him that she was going to do a paternity test. Although he didn't think it was necessary because the facts were already so obvious. However, Su Qingsang's actions made some sense. Su Qingsang looked at him and nodded slightly, but then immediately shook her head. What happened? Hu Jinyao didn't understand what she meant. Do you want me to go with you or not? I want you to go with me, but I want to go alone. But I want to go alone. Su Qingsang thought about her own thoughts. Hu Jinyao, do you know? I want someone to share the burden, and I'll have to face the news later. I don't want to bear it alone. I might have something like that happen. In fact, the answer couldn't be more obvious now. There was a 99% chance that it might be Su Chenghui and Li Qianshue's child. Now she just needed to be sure. But when it came down to it, she didn't want to face that result. I'll go with you. Hu Jinyao held her hand. No matter what the result is, I'll be with you. Su Qingsang met his gaze and suddenly nodded heavily. Okay. She just wanted to find an answer. It didn't matter if it was the worst result or the best result. For her, no matter which result it was, she actually didn't want it to happen. However, she couldn't avoid the matter in front of her. After washing up, she called her classmates and finally went to the paternity test center. She got the 2 paternity test reports. One was for her and Su Chenghui, and the other was for her and Li Qianxue. If possible, she hoped that she wasn't Su Chenghui's daughter or Li Qianshue's daughter. If only she was an orphan. She could treat Kaiping as her biological mother. She could treat her as a favor from the Su family and the Li family. Hu Jinyao took the results from her hand. Su Qingsang didn't stop him. She watched Hu Jinyao open the results and read them. The first one was for her and Su Chenghui. He put the results in Su Qingsang's hand. Actually, you don't need to do this test at all. Because you look so much like Su Chenghui. Su Qingsang knew it herself. She was also anxious that day. She wished that she wasn't Su Chenghui's daughter. Hu Jinyao took out the other paternity test report. Su Qingsang's breathing slowed down. She stared at Hu Jinyao nervously, not wanting to miss any expression on his face. In the end, the test result was only a thin piece of paper. He looked up at Su Qingsang with a clear expression. Su Qingsang, the probability that you and Li Qianxue are mother and daughter is 99.9%. Su Qingsang had already guessed this result. At this time, she wasn't surprised at all. She reached out her hand to take the test report. He memorized every single word written on it. Hua Jinyao looked at her nervously. He didn't understand what she wanted to do now. What could Su Qingsang do? Su Qingsang didn't want to do anything now, and she couldn't do anything. She finished reading and carefully put away the test results. Finally, she raised her head to look at Hua Jinyao. My father is really a scumbag. Isn't that right? Hua Jinyao didn't expect that after waiting for a long time, she would say such a thing. He wanted to say something, but he felt that it was too useless to say anything. Wife, he's really a scumbag. Su Qingsang held the 2 test reports and sniffed, as if trying to relax herself. Tell me, why is he such a scumbag? Hua Jinyao looked at her and reached out to pull her into his arms. He gently patted her back. Do you want to get back at him? Su Qinghui hurt Su Qingsang. He had turned her into an illegitimate daughter. She could have been the daughter of a rich family. That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that he caused Su Qingsang to lose the motherly love of more than 20 years. There were other things. In Hua Jinyao's opinion, Su Qinghui really went too far. No. Su Qingsang pressed her face against Hua Jinyao's chest and rubbed her little face against his chest. Hua Jinyao, I don't want to hate him. It's tiring to hate someone. But I don't want to forgive him just like this. I want to go back to Rong City, okay? Okay. Let's go to Rong City and bring my mother with us. Stay away from Su Qinghui and the Li family. The Li family, Li Qianxue, Su Qinghui. None of them had anything to do with her. I want to cut off contact with them. From now on, I'm just Su Qingsang. An illegitimate daughter without a father and only a mother. No. Hua Jinyao looked at her and suddenly reached out to pinch her little hand. You're still my wife. You're still my biological wife. As he spoke, he leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. Su Qingsang felt a faint warmth surging in her heart. The hurt that came from her biological father seemed to have faded a lot at this moment. Hua Jinyao. Thank you. You've said that before. Then, Hua Jinyao, I like you. You've said that before too. Hua Jinyao deliberately teased her. Then. Su Qingsang was at a loss for words. After thinking for a long time, she finally said, Hua Jinyao, I like you very much. I like you very much. She had never said that before, had she? Hua Jinyao kissed her cheek again with a faint smile on his face. I've never heard that before. You can say it a few more times next time. Su Qingsang couldn't help but want to laugh. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang wrapped her arms around his waist and said with a smile in her voice, It's so good to have you here. Hua Jinyao didn't say anything but hugged her tighter. Su Qingsang could let it go just like that, but Hua Jinyao didn't want to let it go just like that. There were some things he didn't do before because he didn't want to make Su Qingsang unhappy. But in this situation, he had to do something. Tianyu Group had 3 projects with the Li Corporation last year. 2 of the 3 projects were supervised by Su Qinghui himself. So when Su Qinghui saw Hua Jinyao in his office in the past, he wasn't surprised. But today was different. Hua Jinyao looked a little different today. He thought of the conversation between Hua Jinyao and him in the study that day, which was overheard by Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue was so angry that she booked a plane ticket to the United States. She didn't care that it was the new year. It had been a few days now, but Li Qianxue hadn't called him even once. Other than calling old Master Li every day to tell him that he was safe, there was basically nothing else for him to do. Now when Su Qinghui saw Hua Jinyao, he still looked a little uncomfortable. It was really not a glorious thing to be seen arguing with his wife by his son-in-law. The new year is not over yet. Why is there something wrong as soon as you start work? Su Chenghui was the general manager, so it didn't matter even if he came a few days late. It was just that he didn't want to stay at home alone, facing his son's strange and inquisitive eyes, and facing old Master Li's seemingly blaming eyes. There is something wrong, Hu Jinyao said with a calm expression. What is it? Hu Jinyao looked at Su Chenghui. He really couldn't imagine that Su Chenghui, on the surface, didn't look like someone who would do such a thing. But who would know what was going on behind the scenes? Chapter 424. Su Chenghui was stunned. What did you say? Are you going to Rong City? Su Chenghui knew that Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao were going to Rong City sooner or later. He knew that Hu Jinyao was from Rong City and that they would leave Lin City sooner or later, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. When did that happen? Have you really made up your minds? Yes. We've already decided. He had been paying attention to Su Chenghui's facial expression as he spoke. Qingsang's mother has been in Rong City all these years. She also said that she was already used to the climate there. I want to go back. Su Chenghui was stunned to hear him mention Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping was also from Rong City. Did they decide to leave together? Qingsang has also made up her mind. You're coming with me. So I'm here to greet you. Hu Jinyao paused for a second. You're Qingsang's father, after all. We have to tell you that we're leaving Lin City. After all, if he really left, it wouldn't be so easy to see him in the future. The flight will take more than 2 hours. Su Chenghui said nothing. He had just finished arguing with Li Qianxue. For the sake of Su Qingsang's background. Now, Su Qingsang was leaving Rong City. Given her personality, she would probably not come back with Xiang Kaiping by her side. Even if she came back, she wouldn't come back often. This would make things easier for him. He thought. Because the relevant people were not in Lin City, it meant that no one would mention what happened back then. For some reason, Su Chenghui felt that the situation in front of him was not bad. Hu Jinyao looked into Su Chenghui's eyes. He didn't see any reluctance in his eyes. Instead, it seemed like he was relaxed. He looked at Su Chenghui very carefully. He had been looking at Su Chenghui until he saw that trace of relaxation. At first, he just wanted to vent his anger, but now, he wanted to do more for Su Qingsang. Dad seems to be very happy. Hu Jinyao stared at Su Chenghui's face, not missing any expression on his face. No matter what, Qingsang is your daughter. Now that she's leaving, you actually feel very relaxed and happy. Hu Jinyao looked rather relaxed. His voice was very soft, and his body seemed to be leaning back in the chair rather casually. However, his gaze was quite sharp. She stared straight at Su Chenghui's face as if she wanted to stare into his heart. What nonsense are you talking about? Su Chenghui cleared his throat and tried to hide the uneasiness in his heart. How am I very happy? Realizing that his tone was not quite right, Su Chenghui took a deep breath and said, I'm not unhappy. Qingsang is my daughter. Of course, I want her to be well. Now that she's married to you, then you'll be in charge of her future matters. If she wants to leave, I believe you will arrange everything for her. Rong City is bigger than Lin City. She'll definitely have a better future there. In that case, why should I be unhappy? Su Chenghui said a lot in one breath. But none of his words were on point. Hu Jinyao finally understood. He leaned to one side, one hand on the arm of the chair. He faced Su Chenghui with a lazy, sharp, contradictory attitude. You really have no reason to be unhappy. Because for you, Su Qingsang's leaving is a good thing. Su Chenghui was stunned for a moment. He didn't immediately understand what Hu Jinyao meant. He only thought that he was being sarcastic. What nonsense are you talking about? I'll say it again. Su Qingsang is my daughter. Of course, I want her to be well. Really? Hua Jinyao's eyes were sharp. You want her to be well, but you don't want her to be too well. The premise of you wanting her to be well is that you don't want her to be better than Su Peijian. Am I right, Dad? Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao. Su Qinghui was angered by his words and attitude. What are you doing now? Do you think that just because your Tianyu group helped our Li Corporation make some money and did a few projects, you have the right to tell me what to do? I don't dare to criticize you. Hua Jinyao spread his hands, and the smile on his face was a little innocent. Dad, you really hurt my heart by saying that. He used this method to deal with Su Qingsang to deal with Su Qinghui. The expression on his face seemed to be playful, but his eyes were clear. Su Qinghui listened to his nonsense today and felt more and more confused. If you have nothing else to say, you can leave first. I still have something to do. I won't keep you company. Dad. Don't be in a hurry. I haven't finished yet. Hua Jinyao's words and his smile made Su Qinghui feel uncomfortable. I'm thinking. The reason why you're happy is because if Su Qingsang isn't here, no one will appear in front of you all the time, and no one will make you unhappy because their limelight has overshadowed Su Peijian. More importantly, he looked at Su Qinghui's face and said word by word. If Su Qingsang is gone, then the fact that she is not Xiang Caiping's daughter will really become a secret. No one will ever know. Su Qinghui had already heard this news the day before. He didn't want to hear it anymore. Hua Jinyao's next words caught Su Qinghui off guard. No one will know that she is Li Qianxue's biological daughter. Am I right? Su Qinghui stood up abruptly. He stared at Hua Jinyao as if he was looking at a monster. Are you crazy? Saying such words in front of him. If he wasn't crazy, then what was? What a coincidence. Hua Jinyao had a faint smile on his face. When I told Qingsang my speculation a few days ago, she said exactly the same thing as you. Su Qinghui didn't catch the word speculation in his words. He only heard Hua Jinyao say that Su Qingsang also knew. Hua Jinyao. Su Qinghui's chest rose and fell violently. He suppressed the shock in his heart. How could he let Su Qingsang know? Absolutely not. He knew what the consequences would be if he admitted to this matter, so he would never admit it even if he was beaten to death. What on earth do you want to do? Who told you that Su Qingsang is Li Qianxue's daughter? Who? Dad. Let's not beat around the bush. Yes, or no. You know very well. Hua Jinyao, I don't know. I don't know what you want to say. Anyway, get out of here now. I don't want to listen to your nonsense. Nonsense? Alright, he was going to talk nonsense to the end today. You asked me just now who told me. So, I'll tell you now. Who told me? Chapter 425. Su Qinghui watched him take out the two pieces of paper. At first glance, he couldn't see clearly what he was holding. But his intuition told him that it wouldn't be what he wanted to see. Dad, you might not know. Hua Jinyao opened the two pieces of paper and spread them out in front of Su Qinghui. Qingsang took your hair and did a paternity test. Paternity test? Su Qinghui's eyes widened. Actually, there's no need to do it at all. Right? Hua Jinyao raised his eyebrows slightly and pushed the two pieces of paper towards Su Qinghui. Because you know very well whose child Qingsang is. Su Qinghui didn't look at the paternity test report at all. His body was extremely stiff behind the desk, and his whole face was covered with a layer of green. What? Aren't you going to take a look? Hua Jinyao's body leaned forward slightly. His aura was completely unleashed, and he didn't restrain it at all. If an ordinary person faced his gaze, they would probably be the first to give the answer. But who was Su Qinghui? After a brief panic, he calmed down. He didn't even look at the two reports. Hu Jinyao, what do you want? Are you really not going to take a look? Hu Jinyao touched his chin. His sharp eyes stared straight at Su Qinghui's face. Hu Jinyao. Su Qinghui had completely calmed down. What do you want? What can I do? I don't want anything. Hu Jinyao stood up. He put his hands on the table, and his deep eyes didn't miss any expression on Su Qinghui's face. I just want to ask you, when you switched the two children, did you feel guilty? Since Su Qinghui had calmed down, he wouldn't be affected by Hu Jinyao anymore. Are you questioning me now? You can think of it that way. Hu Jinyao's expression didn't change. He was questioning him, so what? I'm really curious. For more than 20 years, you watched Li Qianxue spoil a daughter who wasn't her own, but ignore her own daughter every day. Aren't you very proud? Su Qinghui's expression changed slightly, but only for a moment. He didn't say anything. His eyes were extremely indifferent. Hu Jinyao, this is between me and her. It has nothing to do with you. Yes. This is between you and Li Qianxue. But it has something to do with Qing Sang. You let her carry the name of an illegitimate daughter for so many years. You let her miss out on motherly love for so many years. You even refused to give her even a little more care and love. Su Qinghui, do you think you deserve to be a father? Su Qinghui's expression changed again. He looked at Hu Jinyao and suddenly nodded heavily. His lips curled into a mocking smile. Are you here to vent her anger now? I wouldn't dare. Hu Jinyao's voice was even more sarcastic. No matter what, you are my father-in-law. I wouldn't dare to do anything to you. Then what do you mean by saying all these? Hu Jinyao stood straight. His tall body gave Su Qinghui enough pressure even though there was a desk between them. I don't mean anything. Hu Jinyao clenched his fists, and his heart was filled with great anger. That kind of anger even made him want to beat Su Qinghui up. But he resisted. He just looked at Su Qinghui. I just want to tell you that your secret is no longer a secret. I know it. Qing Sang knows it too. Su Qinghui didn't say a word. Hu Jinyao slightly leaned his head forward. As long as we want, we can tell the old master and Li Qianxue at any time about Qingsang's real identity and whose daughter she is. Su Qinghui was still silent. Before, Xiang Kaiping appeared very suddenly. Su Qingsang knew that she wasn't Xiang Caiping's child. But none of that was as sudden as Hu Jinyao's appearance now. He really didn't think that one day, his secret would be known by others. These things can't be hidden forever. The truth will always be revealed to the world one day. I just want to know, when that day really comes, how will you deal with yourself? Su Qinghui had impulsively wanted to take revenge on Li Qianxue. He chose that path. He thought that he could hide it from the world, but all the way to today, he didn't dare to think about what he would face when Su Qingsang's identity was discovered. Now that Hu Jinyao pointed it out directly, he didn't dare to think about it at all. In the beginning, he could still imagine the result of Li Qianxue knowing the answer, and the scene of him taking revenge and laughing at Li Qianxue. But the more he thought about it, the more he didn't dare to think about it. He couldn't imagine what kind of state Li Qianxue would be when she found out about it. In the face of such a question from Hu Jinyao, he could only force himself to be calm. That's my business. It's none of your business. Hu Jinyao wasn't surprised by his attitude at all. He didn't speak again, just looked at him coldly. The atmosphere in the office was quiet, and neither of them spoke. However, in the corridor outside the office, a figure stood there for a long time, his eyes full of shock. He was about to knock on the door and enter, but at this time, he completely stopped there. As if he was frightened, he quickly ran away without thinking. He ran very fast, as if a ghost was chasing behind him. In the office, Su Qinghui's imposing manner finally weakened. He sat on the chair weakly, lowered his head, and supported his forehead with one hand. I actually didn't want to, I really didn't want to. If it was impulsive at first, he only thought about revenge. In the end, it was already out of control. The further it went, the more he didn't dare to face it. He even deliberately made himself very bad to Su Qingsang and completely ignored her. He hoped that through this action, Li Qianxue wouldn't make things difficult for Su Qingsang. He knew that if he showed Su Qingsang any concern, even if it was only a little, it would make Li Qianxue unhappy. He couldn't give Su Qingsang the status of the Li family's granddaughter-in-law, the eldest daughter of the Su family. But he could let her live a relatively peaceful life. Later, she was admitted to university and moved out. Everything was actually developing in a good direction for him. This was good. She had her own life. She was kind, optimistic, and strong. If she lived a good life, Su Chenghui could also feel less guilty. Things had developed to this point, and it was no longer something Su Chenghui could control. He closed his eyes, and everything that had happened over the years flashed through his mind like a horse lantern. His voice came through his palm. It was so low that if there weren't only the two of them in the office, Hu Jinyao almost couldn't hear it clearly. Do you want to tell Qianxue now? Hu Jinyao looked at him and had a feeling that the Su Chenghui in front of him was a pitiful person. A pitiful person who was punished by hatred and impulsiveness. But he wouldn't sympathize with him. There must be something hateful about a pitiful person. Qingsang didn't let me say it. Su Chenghui slowly raised his head and looked at Hu Jinyao in shock. He didn't believe it. He didn't believe that Su Qingsang would give up her original identity. He didn't believe it. You don't believe it, do you? I don't believe it either. Hu Jinyao's voice was very cold. Thinking of that woman who looked cold but was actually a little silly, his heart ached a little. But this is really her decision. Do you know why? Su Chenghui didn't say anything. He looked at Hu Jinyao with confusion in his eyes. Because Qingsang said. She can't hurt Xiang Kaiping. Su Chenghui's body trembled, and his face had already turned pale. She spent a few months with Xiang Kaiping and really developed a mother-daughter relationship. He didn't dare to think about what would happen if Xiang Kaiping knew that it was her own daughter who had a conflict with her. And it was her own daughter who had almost caused her to be paralyzed. How would Xiang Kaiping face Su Peijian? How would she face Li Qianxue's daughter, who was supposed to be on the opposite side of her? Su Chenghui's thin lips were tightly pursed. He stood there, his body a little stiff. You probably haven't thought about it, have you? Hu Jinyao looked at him and sighed softly in his heart. One move of yours could drive two women crazy. Li Qianxue couldn't accept it, but how could Xiang Kaiping accept it? You probably don't know how good Xiang Kaiping is to Qingsang, do you? Hu Jinyao looked at him indifferently. He didn't mind telling him some facts that Su Chenghui didn't know. Do you know why she met Su Peijian last time? Because she wanted to buy wool for Qingsang and knit a scarf for her. You probably don't know yet, but she not only knit sweaters and scarves for Qingsang, but also made cured meat and sausages for Qingsang. She bought the jade Buddha pendant for Qingsang because she thought that Qingsang stayed in the hospital every day, so she wanted her to wear a jade Buddha pendant to comfort her. Stop it. Su Chenghui suddenly glared at Hu Jinyao. Stop it. He lowered his head again and covered his face with his hands. Hu Jinyao couldn't see his expression, but he didn't want to stay any longer. He looked at Su Chenghui with a calm expression. If Qingsang doesn't want to say it, I won't say it. But, I really want you to know. A secret can't always be a secret. One day, the secret will be exposed. I have a feeling that even if we don't say it, I'm afraid your secret can't be hidden for long. Based on Li Qianxue's misunderstanding of Su Chenghui at that time, she would definitely do something in the future. At that time, could Su Chenghui's secret really be kept? Su Chenghui still didn't raise his head. He maintained that posture. He had been covering his face with his hands, so Hu Jinyao had no way of knowing his expression at that time. Thinking about it, he felt complicated and struggled. But he didn't want to sympathize with Su Qinghui. Compared to him, Li Qianxue and Xiang Kaiping were more pitiful and innocent. Of course, the most innocent was Su Qingsang. Thinking of Su Qingsang, Hu Jinyao didn't want to see Su Qinghui again. He turned and left. In fact, no matter how pitiful Li Qianxue and Xiang Kaiping were, it had nothing to do with him. He just felt sorry for that little woman. She was too sensible and too mature, which made him feel sorry for her. As for Su Qinghui, he knew that with what he said today, Su Qinghui would probably have a hard time in the near future. Chapter 426. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao went home. Today, she had asked Sister Lu to tidy up the place. I asked Sister Lu to tidy up Mom's room. Mom will be discharged in 2 days. When the time comes, we'll bring Mom home to take care of her. Okay. Hu Jinyao agreed. I wanted to live in your villa since it's bigger. It's also convenient for Mom to move around. Sure. Whatever you say. Also, Su Qingsang found that Hu Jinyao only listened to her and didn't say anything. What's wrong? Why are you only listening to me? Do you have any objections? You decide. Hu Jinyao pulled her to his side and sat down. These are all small things. You don't have to ask me. I'm not asking you. Su Qingsang turned to look at him. What's wrong with you today? Something doesn't seem right. Hu Jinyao shook his head and said, the Lantern Festival is coming. Do you want to go back to Rong City with me to see Grandpa? Let's make some arrangements and bring Mom over. Su Qingsang bit her lip. This matter had been decided a long time ago. She was not reluctant to part with it. Sure. I'll ask my mother. Then, he asked Dr. Jiang. If he says it's okay, we'll take Mom back to Rong City. Hu Jinyao reached out and gently stroked the hair on her forehead. Let me know after you've asked the doctor. I'll arrange the rest. Yeah. Su Qingsang had nothing to worry about. He had always been efficient and more thorough than her. Xiang Kaiping would probably agree with the decision to return to Rong City. However, Su Qingsang suddenly fell silent, and a complicated expression appeared on her face. What happened? Su Qingsang looked at him, her lips pressed into a straight line. You said before we left Lin City. Will she come back? Seeing the hesitation in her eyes, Hu Jinyao felt as if his heart had been pricked by a needle. He reached out and pulled her into his embrace, hugging her tightly. You want to see her? Su Qingsang's face was pressed against his chest, and she could smell the refreshing scent of his body. A little. If he went to Rong City, he probably wouldn't come back easily. I want to see her before I leave. Hu Jinyao didn't speak. She looked up at him and said, You don't think so? There's nothing you can't do. Hu Jinyao tightened his arms around her waist. If you really miss her that much. Even if you want to fly to the United States to see her, let alone wait for her to come back. Su Qingsang lowered her head and seemed to be thinking. Forget it. It's better not to see him. You really can't see him? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. She must be in a bad mood recently. I'd better not provoke her. The last time Li Qianxue heard that Su Qinghui was cheating, she thought he was in love with someone else. He was probably in a bad mood right now. If she appeared again, it would undoubtedly provoke Li Qianxue even more. Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang. She seemed to be cold and didn't care about anyone. Actually, he was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. As long as he got close to her and familiarized himself with her, he would understand. I told you. If you want to see him, you can see him. Don't worry too much. How about this? Su Qingsang thought for a moment and said, let's set a time to go to Rong City. If she comes back before then, I'll go see her. If she doesn't come back before then, she didn't say the rest of the sentence. If that was really the case, she and her mother were not meant to be. Hua Jinyao held her whole body in his arms, lowered his head, and kissed her cheek. His kiss was very light, like a feather falling on her cheek. Do you miss her very much? Not really. Su Qingsang shook her head with a smile. If I knew about this earlier, I'm afraid I wouldn't be as calm as I am now. But it's grown up now. And our mother is here. So I'm much calmer. Su Qingsang suddenly became serious and looked at Hua Jinyao with a serious face. Do you know? When I was young, I often saw her holding Su Peijian. Then she would talk to her in a very gentle tone. In fact, she was a very strict person outside. But she was very gentle to Su Peijian. So I thought that if I had a mother, she would be like that. Because of this, Su Qingsang kept trying to get close to Li Qianxue. But in the end, she failed. Hua Jinyao nodded and looked at her calm face. He felt that she was too calm. You still want to acknowledge her, don't you? No. Su Qingsang denied it. I don't want to acknowledge her. I just feel that if I can, I want to see her. I just want to see her. It could be considered as fulfilling a wish in his heart. Although such a thought was a little ridiculous. Don't worry. I really just want to see her. I won't acknowledge her. Since she had made up her mind, she wouldn't regret it. But before that, she still needed some time and calmness to completely let it go. Hua Jinyao didn't say anything else. He hugged her tightly. His deep eyes narrowed slightly, as if he had made a decision. Su Qingsang didn't expect that she would meet another person before she went to see Li Qianxue. Since she was going to Rong City, she had to choose some gifts for old Master Hua. And Hua Jinyao's great-uncle, who was already living in Rong City. Her two uncles and aunt had to prepare some gifts. Shi Mengwan had been shopping with Su Qingsang for a long time, and she had also been choosing gifts for a long time. Although it was said that it was good to be rich, it could be solved with money. But after listening to Su Qingsang's words, Shi Mengwan felt that there were many people in the Hua family. There are so many relatives in the Hua family. Little Qingsang, with your simple personality, can you really handle it? Even if I can't handle it, I have to. In fact, Su Qingsang was indeed most afraid of troublesome interpersonal relationships, but she met Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao is so good to me. It's only right for me to face his family for him. You have awareness. Shi Mengwan patted her shoulder heavily. But I think you don't seem to be in a good mood today. What's wrong? You want to separate from me? Can't bear to part with me? Yes, yes, yes. Su Qingsang nodded repeatedly and reached out to pinch her cheeks. You don't know how much I can't bear to part with you. Just talk, don't touch me. Shi Mengwan touched her face narcissistically. I just took care of my face yesterday. Let me see. Su Qingsang leaned over to look at her, and there was a hint of teasing in her tone. Your face is so smooth, and your skin is so good. You still have to take care of it. You're not giving us a way out. Don't be ridiculous. You don't know the suffering of the hungry. You have Hua Jinyao. But I'm still single. I have to take good care of myself and make myself look more beautiful so that I can hook up with a tall, rich, and handsome man like you, right? No need to hook up. I'll ask Hua Jinyao to introduce a few to you. How about that? Okay. Shi Mengwan nodded with a casual expression. Su Qingsang didn't believe her. Why do I feel like it's fake? You don't believe me? If you don't believe me, I'll go find one later. Come on. Find one. You find one. Su Qingsang looked around and saw a man in front of her. His back looked a little familiar. That Good figure. His front should be good too. Aren't you looking for one? Go. 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 I'm not afraid of you. Shi Mengwan was provoked by her. She glared at her and quickly took 2 steps forward. She took out a red bill from her bag, turned around, and made a face at Su Qingsang. Then, she quickly took a few steps forward to block the handsome man in front of her. Sir, I'm sorry. Did you drop this money? The moment Shi Mengwan raised her head, her expression changed. She stood there, exuding a dejected aura. Su Qingsang sensed that something was wrong and quickly stepped forward. Mengwan, what's wrong? When she saw the man, Su Qingsang was also stunned. No wonder the handsome man in front of her looked familiar. It turned out to be Zhang Haoze. Mr. Zhang. Hello. Hello, Mrs. Hua. Zhang Haoze greeted Su Qingsang and glanced at Shi Mengwan. I'm sorry, I didn't drop this money. Really? Shi Mengwan bit her lip. She crumpled the money into a ball and held it in her palm. Then, I'll ask someone else. Okay. Zhang Haoze responded and glanced at Su Qingsang. Mrs. Hua, are you shopping? Yes. Say hello to President Hua for me when you're free. I will. Thank you. Then, I have something else to do. I'll leave now. Go ahead. Su Qingsang felt that it was very stressful to be with someone like Zhang Haoze. After he left, she turned to look at Shi Mengwan. You're so lucky. She didn't try to strike up a conversation, but the moment she did, she ran into Zhang Haoze. Lucky? Shi Mengwan smiled mockingly. I think that I'm too unlucky. If she wasn't so unlucky, how could Zhang Haoze forget her? Mengwan, I think, do you want to do something else? What? I think that you might have mistaken me for someone else. After all, you haven't seen each other for more than 10 years. Seeing the worry in Su Qingsang's eyes, Shi Mengwan pretended to be careless and waved her hand. Don't worry. I'm just saying. I've decided to give up. Really? Of course it's true. Shi Mengwan hooked her arm. Alright. Alright, let's continue shopping. Buy gifts. Hua Jinyao has so many relatives. How many gifts do you need? Let's go. Su Qingsang was actually worried about Shi Mengwan. Shi Mengwan's situation was more complicated than hers. However, she also knew that it would be difficult to persuade her at the moment. She thought about it. Why not wait until she returned to Rong City and then invite Shi Mengwan to hang out? Then, she could let Hua Jinyao introduce a few young men to her. Maybe after Shi Mengwan met a few outstanding men, she would find that there were still many good men in the world. Let's go. I remember there's a good shop in front. Let's go and have a look. Shi Mengwan pulled Su Qingsang forward. Su Qingsang couldn't help but look at her, worried that she had really let go. Unexpectedly, Shi Mengwan pulled her too fast, and Su Qingsang was too focused on her. As a result, she accidentally bumped into a person who came out of the shop. Sorry. Su Qingsang hurriedly apologized. At the same time, she took a step back. Chapter 427. When Su Yusin saw Su Qingsang, he was obviously stunned. Almost subconsciously, he took a step to her side. Su Qingsang was also a little surprised. Su Yusin's movement happened to block the girl behind him. Because of his action, Su Qingsang couldn't help but take another look at the girl, and then found that she was not the Bai Jihan from before. Su Qingsang withdrew her gaze and didn't intend to meddle. Yusin. You're here shopping too? Yes. Su Yusin nodded and looked at Su Qingsang with a somewhat complicated expression. With your girlfriend? Did he mean that Bai Jihan was a thing of the past? Thinking of the woman who aborted a child for Su Yusin, Su Qingsang's gaze was a little subtle. She's not my girlfriend. Su Yusin explained quickly, completely ignoring the somewhat embarrassed face of the girl next to him. I just happened to meet her. Su Qingsang nodded. When she came just now, she really didn't see the two of them holding hands. Then, you guys continue. Sister. Su Yusin saw that Su Qingsang was about to leave and couldn't help but call her. Su Qingsang turned her face to look at him and raised her eyebrows, as if she didn't understand why he called her. Well, Su Yusin looked at Su Qingsang with his lips crossed. He actually had a lot to ask her and a lot to say. But now, facing Su Qingsang's indifferent gaze, he couldn't say a word. After a day, he still hadn't digested the news he heard yesterday. The shocking news that made him dumbfounded. Su Peijian wasn't his sister, Su Qingsang was. When he heard the news outside Su Qinghui's door, he was completely stunned. He couldn't believe it and didn't dare to face it. He even ran away like he was escaping, but after leaving, he couldn't help but turn back. He wanted to question Su Qinghui, ask him why he did this, and why he could do this. But before he could ask clearly, he heard Hua Jinyao's words. He said that Su Qingsang didn't intend to recognize Li Qianxue at all. That news shocked him again. He couldn't understand why Su Qingsang refused to recognize them. Refused to recognize Li Qianxue. Even after he heard Hua Jinyao's explanation. She said that Su Qingsang didn't want to hurt Xiang Kaiping, but did that mean she didn't want to hurt Xiang Kaiping? However, when he calmed down and seriously considered Su Qingsang's position, he tragically found that they really didn't have the right to ask Su Qingsang to acknowledge them. Had Li Qianxue ever cared about Su Qingsang? No. Had Su Qinghui ever been nice to Su Qingsang? Not at all. Had he ever been nice to Su Qingsang since he was a kid? Still nothing. He used to dislike this sister from the bottom of his heart. He thought that as an illegitimate daughter, she brought shame to the Su family. More importantly, her existence made the feelings of discord between her parents. But in reality, she was admitted to Lin City's a university medical school at the age of 17. After he graduated, he took the postgraduate exam and was now an outstanding doctor. What about Su Peijian? He had the ability, but the things he did in the dark. He had attacked Su Qingsang over and over again. The difference in strength between the two was obvious. In the past, he could still say that Su Peijian had her own standpoint. But when he calmed down, he only felt ashamed. As an illegitimate daughter, who didn't have many resources and was neglected by her parents, she worked hard enough and was ambitious enough. Putting all of this aside, Su Qingsang's attitude towards her family since she was a child was clear. Even if they weren't close, there was enough respect. He didn't like her before because Su Qingsang's existence made Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue not get along. But now he knew that Su Qingsang was his sister. His biological sister. He couldn't tell what he was feeling. Yesterday, he wanted to rush to Su Qingsang and explain things to her. But halfway through the car, he chickened out again. Yes. He chickened out. Li Qianxue went to the United States to accompany Su Peijian. For more than 20 years, Li Qianxue really loved Su Peijian as her own daughter. If Li Qianxue knew, what would she do? Su Qingsang didn't dare to think about it, and neither did Su Yusin. But was he really not going to say it? He struggled for an entire night without an answer. Early in the morning, his eyes were dark. Old Master Li could also see that he was in a bad mood, so he asked him to go out for a walk and didn't have to accompany him at home. He went out and met this female classmate next to him on the way. This female classmate's father had business dealings with the Li Corporation. Due to their friendship, when the other party asked her to help choose a gift for someone, he didn't object. He didn't expect to meet Su Qingsang. He looked at Su Qingsang and fell into a state of sluggishness. Those thousands of suppressed words seemed to be unable to be suppressed at this time. He couldn't help but want to get close to her and talk to her. What's wrong? Su Qingsang looked at Su Yusin, her younger brother, with obvious concern in her eyes. What happened? Nothing. Su Yusin didn't know what he could say. My mother went to the United States. I know. Su Qingsang's heart skipped a beat. She didn't understand why he would mention Li Qianxue. What's wrong? She might not be back so early. I know. Su Qingsang had already thought about it. She might not be able to see Li Qianxue before she left. Now that it was confirmed, she was a little disappointed, but she could accept it. But why did Su Yusin say this to her out of the blue? Could it be that he knew something? Su Yusin took a step forward. He seemed to want to clarify, but the female classmate next to him stood up at this time. Yusin, is this your sister? Isn't your sister Peijin? The girl had attended the Su family's banquet, so she naturally knew Su Peijin. However, she didn't know much about Su Qingsang. Shut up. It's none of your business. Su Yusin heard this and glared at the girl. I have 2 sisters. Can't I? The girl was shocked by Su Yusin. Her face changed a little, and she was speechless for a moment. When Su Yusin looked at Su Qingsang again, his eyes were full of apology. Sister, I'm sorry. It's okay. Su Qingsang waved her hand. If there's nothing else, let's continue shopping. You guys go ahead. Su Yusin's lips moved. He wanted to speak a few times, but in the end, he couldn't say a word. He could only watch as Su Qingsang left. The girl behind him still wanted to approach, but Su Yusin glared at her. He said, go shopping by yourself, and left. The girl was left there stomping her feet in anger. Qingsang, what's wrong with this cheap brother of yours? After they separated, Shi Mengwan whispered to Su Qingsang, why do I feel that he's acting weird today? You can see that too. Su Qingsang could see that too. However, she didn't think that Su Yusin would know that secret. After all, Hua Jinyao couldn't tell Su Yusin, let alone Su Chenghui. Yes. Shi Mengwan thought of some things that Su Qingsang had told her before. Right, he specifically mentioned his mother. Do you think he hates you and Hua Jinyao for sending Su Peijin to the United States? No way. Su Yusin wasn't that kind of person. However, Su Qingsang wasn't sure. I really don't know. You may know a person's face, but you don't know his heart. Shi Mengwan was afraid that Su Qingsang valued family too much and wouldn't even know that she was tricked in the end. I think it's better for you to keep a distance from the Su family. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. Keep a distance from the Su family. In this situation, even if she didn't want to keep a distance, she couldn't. After all, she was afraid that if she really got too close to the Su family, she might be exposed. You won't be unhappy if I say this, will you? Why would I? Su Qingsang knew that Shi Mengwan was doing this for her own good, so she wouldn't be unhappy. However, as for her own background, she suddenly didn't know how to tell Shi Mengwan. Of course, she knew that Shi Mengwan could keep a secret. However, Shi Mengwan was also on good terms with Xiang Kaiping now, and she often visited her when she was free. If Shi Mengwan found out, it would be very difficult for her to guarantee that Shi Mengwan wouldn't give herself away in front of Xiang Kaiping. Let's go. Let's continue shopping. Let's not talk about it for now. Since she had decided to treat Xiang Kaiping as her own mother, there was no need to say anything else. Okay. Let's go. Florida, America. Li Qianxue saw that Su Peijin had returned, and there was finally a little smile on her face. You're back. Yes. Compared to her, Su Peijin's expression was much worse. In the past, when she was still in Lin City, the new year was a lively time. She could play with her friends and fly everywhere. But this year, she was trapped here by Su Chenghui, and he wouldn't let her leave. He even enrolled her in some so-called advanced course. This advanced course sounded nice. It was a business management advanced course for young people. However, the people in it were people who were about the same age as her father in Su Peijian's eyes. She didn't want to go there for a day, and she couldn't wait to go back to China. Mom. Su Peijian sat down next to Li Qianxue and hooked her arm. Can't I go home? I don't want to stay here anymore. Li Qianxue didn't want her daughter to stay here either. If she could, she would take her daughter away immediately. However, she didn't want to go home now either. She felt disgusted when she thought that Su Qinghui had another woman. Didn't your father say that you should study for 3 months? But I can't stay for a month. Besides, you don't know what they're talking about, and I don't want to hear it at all. Su Peijian shook her arm and said coquettishly, Mom, just agree to go home, okay? Okay. Li Qianxue didn't speak. She really didn't want to go back, didn't want to see Su Qinghui's face. However, if she went back like this, she was afraid that Su Qinghui would quarrel with her again because of that woman. Mom. Su Peijian really felt wronged. I didn't do it on purpose. I also know that I was wrong. But Dad still won't let it go. Look, it's going to be the Lantern Festival in a few days. But I still have to spend the festival alone outside. I already said that I will accompany you. Chapter 428. Speaking of this, Li Qianxue's expression changed. In the past, even if she and Su Qinghui didn't get along on the surface, at least their family was still together. What about now? Not only did she not get along with Su Qinghui, but she also couldn't get along with him on the surface. If Su Qinghui didn't care about her, why should she care about him? You want to go home, right? Yes. I want to go home. Su Peijian saw that her mother's attitude had softened, so she quickly added fuel to the fire. Just take it that we're going back to accompany grandfather, okay? Li Qianxue was silent for a moment. If possible, she didn't want to go against Su Qinghui. For so many years, it seemed that she had the final say in everything, big and small. However, when it came down to it, she could never win against Su Qinghui. Since he dared to have a woman outside and was heartless to her, then he shouldn't blame her for being unjust. She was the one who gave birth to their daughter. Even if he didn't feel sorry for her, she would feel sorry for her. Li Qianxue patted Su Peijian's hand and made a decision. Don't go home. There are still a few days before the Lantern Festival. Let's go play for a few days before going back. Thank you, Mom. Su Peijian couldn't help but kiss Li Qianxue's cheek. Mom, you're the best. You. Li Qianxue poked Su Peijian's forehead, her eyes full of love. By the time Su Yusen arrived in the United States with the address given by Su Qinghui, Li Qianxue had already taken Su Peijian to Las Vegas. He could only fly over again. This time, Li Qianxue and Su Peijian met without a hitch. Mom. Sister. When he arrived, it was night time. Su Peijian and Li Qianxue were about to go out with their bags and coats in their hands. Where are you going? Let's go play downstairs. Su Peijian was in a bad mood and wanted to play a few rounds in the casino downstairs. Yusen, you came just in time. Do you want to join us? No. Su Yusen shook his head and looked at Li Qianxue. Mom, I have something to tell you. What is it that you can't tell me over the phone? Did you have to fly all the way to America just to tell me? Li Qianxue's hand was held by Su Peijian, so she couldn't move. She glanced at Su Yusen. He didn't look too well after flying all the way here. It seemed like he was exhausted. Have you eaten? I ate something on the plane. Not now. Li Qianxue did not miss the tiredness in her son's eyes. Even if you're not hungry, you must be tired, right? I'll go back to my room to rest first. We'll talk about it after you've rested. Mom. What I said is very important. Su Yusin took a step forward and was about to speak when he saw Su Peijian standing next to Li Qianxue. He thought for a moment and lowered his head helplessly. Forget it. I'll go and put my things down, then I'll accompany you down. Yusin, are you worried about us? Su Peijian smiled and patted her brother on the shoulder. All right. Don't worry. The security here is very good. Let me follow you. Otherwise, you're not allowed to go. Su Yusin was very insistent. He looked at Li Qianxue and said, if you don't let me follow you, I will tell Grandpa that you came to the casino to play. This time, it wasn't just Su Peijian. Li Qianxue's expression did not look too good either. Old Master Li didn't like young people to gamble. No matter what kind of entertainment it was fine to have fun, but once it was involved in gambling, it was out of the question. His health was not very good. Even Li Qianxue had to be careful. All right. I'll let you follow me. You haven't learned anything else since you grew up, but you've learned your father's way of managing people. Li Qianxue would not say anything bad about her father. If Su Yusin wanted to be like him, he would be like Su Qinghui. Yes. Brother, you're becoming more and more like Dad. Su Peijian added, not forgetting to lean in front of Li Qianxue and ask for her favor. I'm the best. I'm not like Dad at all. You're not just not like your father, you're not like me either. Li Qianxue pinched her cheek. There was no anger in her eyes, but more of a tease. I look like Grandma. Su Peijian had also seen a photo of Su Qinghui's mother. It had to be said that she really looked like her grandmother. The simple conversation between mother and daughter fell into Su Yusin's ears. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Yes. Su Peijian was not like her father or her mother. It was such a simple thing, but after so many years, no one paid attention to it. But Su Qingsang was different. She looked very much like Su Qinghui. To be honest, Su Qingsang and she were more like Su Qinghui's children. Yusin. Li Qianxue looked at her son in a daze and was a little worried. Are you too tired? If you are really too tired. He returned to his room to rest. Don't worry, we won't play for too long. We'll be back soon. Su Yusin stood there without moving. He nodded almost imperceptibly and carried his luggage into the room. When he came out again, he had already changed his clothes and was wearing a very decent three-piece suit. Although he was young, he often followed Su Qinghui and received an elite education, so he naturally had an imposing manner. He stood next to Li Qianxue. His tall figure gave her a sense of security. Mom, let me protect you today. Stupid Yusin, you only protect your mother and not me, right? That's right. You have a problem with that? You're so fierce, why would you need anyone to protect you? Sure. Are you itching for a beating? Su Peijian was about to attack Su Yusin as she spoke. This was originally a joke the two siblings often made in the past, but now Su Yusin was a little unable to bring it up. If it weren't for Su Qinghui's craziness, if it weren't for Su Qinghui's stubbornness, the one who did these things with him and was so close to him would only be Su Qingsang. Now it was Su Peijian. And even if one day he and Su Qingsang knew each other's identities, he was afraid that he and Su Qingsang would not be able to joke around like he did with Su Peijian. After all, the estrangement between them had been too long. It was difficult to repair the lost youth and friendship that grew up together. Li Qianxue sensitively noticed that her son's mood was not quite right today. She glanced at Su Peijian and said, "All right, your brother must be tired after coming all the way here. Don't disturb him." Unlike Su Qinghui, who only cared about Su Peijian, Li Qianxue could basically be fair to the two children. Occasionally, because Su Peijian was a girl and was her first child, she had to dote on her a little more. But in general, she still considered herself a very fair mother. As expected, Su Peijian stopped making trouble, but Su Yusin's expression was complicated. Li Qianxue loved Su Peijian so much. If he told the truth later, without much time to think, the three of them went downstairs. When they went to the magnificent hall, they saw a prosperous scene in front of them. Su Peijian liked crowds, and the scene in front of her was like a fish in water. Su Yusin had been following Li Qianxue and Su Peijian, watching them sit down in front of one dealer after another. They put down the chips, then got up and went to another. At first, she lost more than she won. Su Peijian lost a few million. She didn't take it seriously, and Li Qianxue naturally wouldn't take it seriously either. In such a place, a few million was like money. Su Yusin looked a little sad. He thought of Su Qingsang again. When she first bought that house, it was only $1 million or so. At that time, Su Peijian was not happy. She felt that Su Qinghui was too good to Su Qingsang. But in reality, all the enjoyment and fun that day should belong to Su Qingsang, not Su Peijian. Li Qianxue didn't want to play at first. Later, seeing that her daughter lost a lot, her hands were itching to try her luck. She didn't know if it was like what ordinary people said, losing in love, but winning in gambling. In more than half an hour, Li Qianxue not only earned back the millions that her daughter lost, but also won more than 10 million. Wow! Mom, you're so lucky today. Su Peijian's eyes lit up. Mom, continue. Which one do you think is better? Go big. Li Qianxue didn't care about the money, but the feeling of winning was very good. She swept away the anger she had suffered at Su Qinghui's hands. She pushed out more than half of the chips in her hand. Go big. She turned to look at Su Peijian, but her tone was a bit persuasive. This kind of thing, just play for a while. Don't take it too seriously. This is the last round. Whether we win or lose, we go back. Okay. Listen to Mom. As Su Peijian spoke, she saw Su Yusin standing still out of the corner of her eye. She couldn't help but pat him on the shoulder. Yusin, what are you doing? You're here, but you don't play a few rounds. What? Not enough pocket money? How much do you want? I'll give it to you. I don't need your money. Li Qianxue looked at her daughter's generosity and smiled. Yusin, if you really want to play, I'll give you these chips. Mom will give these chips to you. No need. I'll just watch you play. Su Yusin glanced at the table and watched Li Qianxue put most of the chips on the big side. Mom, I think you should go small this round. Why? You've opened 7 small rounds in a row. Do you think this one is still small? It's possible. As Su Yusin spoke, he leaned over and put the chips on the small side. Anyway, it's the last round. Let's bet on this one. I'll listen to you. Li Qianxue didn't care about the money. If you win, these are all yours. Mom, you're so biased. Su Peijian pouted, but she wasn't really unhappy. 5 minutes later, Su Yusin looked at the more than 30 million he had won and shook the check in his hand at Li Qianxue. Okay, I know you're good. Li Qianxue looked at her son, her eyes full of smiles. We won money today. Tomorrow, we'll go shopping. You guys are happy. Su Peijian was very depressed. You all won money, but I lost. I'm really unlucky tonight. Although she didn't lose much, compared with Su Yusin and Li Qianxue's luck, she was much worse. Okay. I'll go back and make it up to you. Su Yusin looked at Su Peijian and thought of the secret he knew. Maybe you've been too lucky in the past 20 years. That's why I want you to change your luck. Yusin, what nonsense are you talking about? Su Peijian was suddenly unhappy, but Su Yusin was unwilling to change his words. He turned in the direction of the elevator. Mom, look at him. If Li Qianxue still couldn't see that Su Yusin was in a bad mood today, then she would have been Su Yusin's mother for so many years for nothing. Okay. Don't talk too much. The three of them went upstairs again. Li Qianxue asked Su Peijian to go back to her room to rest, and she followed Su Yusen back to his room. Chapter 429. What happened in Lin City? Su Yusen also wanted to ask. He wanted to know what had happened. Why was it that his family was no longer like a home? Her father loved someone else and was with her mother for revenge. The mother couldn't get what she wanted. It was a pity that she had loved someone else's daughter for so many years. His sister was his sister, but she was no longer born to the same mother as him. His sister, who was born from the same mother as him, had now become the most distant member of the Yan family. Su Yusen was only 17 or 18 years old. Even if he had been raised by old Master Li's side at an early age. She also learned a lot from Su Chenghui. But how could those business things compare to getting along with family? He sat there without saying a word, and his whole person exuded a sense of dejection. Li Qianxue was shocked by Su Yusen's reaction. She had never seen Su Yusen like this. Her eyes were full of worry. Yusen, are you okay? Su Yusen suddenly reached out and hugged Li Qianxue. This action stunned Li Qianxue again. Ever since her son entered primary school, he had never been this close to her. The only thing Li Qianxue could think of was that something must have happened at home. Yusen, what happened at home? Tell me honestly. Su Yusen's voice was hoarse. He hugged Li Qianxue tightly. He was actually the same as Su Qingsang. He didn't dare to imagine Li Qianxue's reaction when she found out everything. It was hard to say, hard to say. Yusen. Li Qianxue was even more worried about her son. Without thinking, she went to call Su Peijian. If you don't tell me, I'll call your sister. Mom. Su Yusen grabbed Li Qianxue. Don't go yet. Li Qianxue looked at her son, her face full of confusion. What's wrong with you? Tell me. Su Yusen's lips were pressed into a straight line, and he looked very serious. When he put on such an expression, he looked very much like Su Chenghui. Li Qianxue frowned. Is it your father? What happened to your dad? Mom. Su Yusen looked up at Li Qianxue. Do you know that dad, Tell me. What happened to your dad? No matter how angry she was, Su Chenghui was the man she had loved for so many years. She grabbed Su Yusen's arm and said, Tell me. What happened to your dad? Dad, Su Yusen didn't know what to say. He looked at Li Qianxue and thought about her endurance. If Dad did something wrong to you, sorry about me? What are you referring to? Li Qianxue's heart was beating very, very fast. Caring about Su Chenghui had almost become an instinct. It had been more than 20 years. Even if she didn't want to, she couldn't help but care about him. She's my sister. I was talking about Su Qingsang. Su Yusen carefully looked at Li Qianxue's expression. He kept thinking in his heart, about my sister, Su Qingsang. Do you know that she's actually, Li Qianxue's expression was a little strange. She stood up straight and stared at Su Yusen's face. Now even you know. Su Yusen looked up at Li Qianxue, as if he didn't quite understand that Li Qianxue already knew. Mom, you know. Of course I know. Thinking of 7, Li Qianxue only felt a fire burning in her heart. Why do you think I came to the United States? Su Yusen stood up and said, Mom. Mom, you actually know. Li Qianxue's expression was ugly, but Su Yusen couldn't sit still anymore. Mom, since you know, why did you still treat sister like that? What did I do? Li Qianxue looked at Su Yusen and couldn't believe that he was actually speaking up for Su Qingsang. How did I treat her? What do you want me to do to her? Don't you want to acknowledge her? Don't you want to treat her better? Su Yusen's eyes widened. He thought of the relationship between Li Qianxue and Su Peijian. Could it be that Li Qianxue really didn't mind? I'm good to her. Li Qianxue looked at her son as if she was looking at a madman. She didn't understand what Su Yusin meant by acknowledging her. Su Yusin, are you my son? You actually want me to be good to the daughter of another woman and your father? Li Qianxue's heart began to hurt at this moment. Su Qinghui had lied to her and hurt her, and now even her own son was siding with someone else. She only felt that her breath was stuck in her throat. She stared at Su Yusin as if she was looking at her own enemy. Su Yusin suddenly realized that Li Qianxue was not talking about the same thing as him at all. Mom, what are you thinking? How did sister become the child of another woman? Sister, she is you at all, Su Yusin. With a bang, the door opened. Su Peijian stood at the door and glared at Su Yusin. What the hell is wrong with you? She quickly entered the door and raised her hand to point at Su Yusin. You flew all the way to the United States just to speak up for another woman's child. Have you ever thought about how I feel? The words that Su Yusin wanted to say were interrupted because of Su Peijian's sudden appearance. He looked at Su Peijian and thought of the sibling relationship between the two of them for more than 10 years. He suddenly couldn't say the rest of the words. Su Peijian looked angry. Looking at Su Yusin's ugly face and then looking at Li Qianxue's hurt face, she was furious. Yusin, are you mom's son or not? Are you kidding me? What kind of attitude are you using to talk to mom? Have you been bewitched by a ghost? How dare you speak up for Su Qingsang? Do you know that she is not even that woman's child? She doesn't even know where the bastard came from. You actually quarreled with mom because of her, shut up. Who are you calling a bastard? Su Yusin couldn't help but interrupt Su Peijian. She is also dad's daughter. She is also mom's daughter. With a slap, Li Qianxue raised her hand and slapped Su Yusin hard in the face. This was the first time she hit Su Yusin. The numbness from the slap made her take a few steps back. She looked at her palm and then at Su Yusin. There were tears in her eyes, but they didn't fall. She swallowed and thought about how she had been begging for more than 20 years but couldn't get it. She thought about how Su Qinghui used her love to hurt her again and again. She thought about many things, one by one. But all of them added up couldn't compare to the pain caused to her by her son standing on Su Qingsang's side and against her. Mom. Su Peijian took a few steps forward and held Li Qianxue immediately. She glared at Su Yusin. Su Yusin, are you satisfied? Do you want me to die of anger before you're satisfied? Su Yusin's face was burning. He didn't even bother to raise his hand to cover it. He looked at Li Qianxue and couldn't say the rest of the words. Mom. I just don't want you to regret it. I regret it now. Li Qianxue actually regretted it a long time ago. But she was a proud person. She was so proud that even if she knew she had gone the wrong way, she was unwilling to look back. Her body trembled a little. She stared at Su Yusin blankly, only feeling that there was a fire burning in her heart, burning her to the point where she lost all reason. I regretted it a long time ago. She regretted marrying Su Qinghui. She regretted not leaving in time when she found out that he had no hope of falling in love with her. How many years had been missed by her just like that? She had always been a proud daughter of heaven. She had been held in the palm of someone's hand. In the end, for Su Qinghui, she retreated again and again and endured again and again. Peijian, let's go. She didn't want to see her son for the time being. She turned to leave, stumbling a little. Mom. Su Yusin took a step forward. He couldn't let Li Qianxue leave just like that. Do you know what you have missed all these years? Do you know that in fact, Dad, he... Enough. Li Qianxue closed her eyes. If you still think of me as your mother, don't say anymore. I don't want to listen to you now. Su Yusin watched the door open and close in front of him. His whole person became more and more dejected. He took a few steps back and sat on the bed weakly. His whole person was filled with confusion. He was in a daze in the room for a long time. He didn't know how much time had passed. He abruptly stood up and quickly walked outside. Su Peijian was already asleep. He entered her room and looked at her deeply. She was his half-sister. He should turn around and leave, but he couldn't. He thought of the news he had received. Before the Lantern Festival, Su Qingsang would go to Rong City with Hu Jinyao. It was only a few days before the Lantern Festival. If Su Qingsang really went to Rong City, Li Qianxue would know, but she would also lose her daughter. Her real daughter. He took a few steps forward and walked to the bedside. He bent down and gently pulled out a strand of Su Peijian's hair. Holding the hair tightly, he turned around and walked to Li Qianshue's room. Li Qianxue had booked a presidential suite with a total of 3 rooms. He walked in and found that Li Qianxue was still awake. "Mom." Li Qianxue sat on the sofa in front of the French window. Hearing his voice, she didn't turn her head. "You still know that I am your mother?" "Of course I know." Su Yusin took a few steps forward. He squeezed Su Peijian's hair tightly in his palm and walked to Li Qianxue. "Mom, I'm sorry. My attitude wasn't very good today." Li Qianxue didn't speak. Her heart was broken. At first, it was her husband, and then it was her son. She felt that she had a hard life. She often thought that it might be because her previous life had been too smooth. That was why she couldn't get what she wanted for the rest of her life. "Mom, why aren't you sleeping?" Su Yusin's eyes were filled with pity. But he knew very well that if some things were not said, he was afraid that Li Qianxue would suffer even more in the future. "Go to sleep." "I can't sleep." Her life was a failure. Her husband didn't love her, and her son opposed her. Li Qianxue wanted to cry, but she was used to being dominant. She didn't even know how to cry now. Su Yusin stood in front of her. He looked at his mother's long hair. Chapter 430. What are you trying to say? Li Qianxue still didn't turn around. Her voice was a little hoarse, and it sounded a little suppressed. "If you want to speak up for Su Qingsang, you don't have to." For so many years, she had not made a move against her, and that was already her greatest tolerance. If he still wanted her to treat Su Qingsang well, like her own daughter, she couldn't do it. She wasn't the Virgin Mary. "Mom, I'm not trying to defend her. I just want to ask you, do you trust me?" "What are you trying to say?" Li Qianxue finally turned around. She looked at Su Yusin, not understanding what he meant. Su Yusin reached out and placed his hand on Li Qianxue's shoulder. "Mom, there are some things that I know you won't believe even if I tell you. So, I decided to skip the process." As he spoke, he pulled out a strand of hair from Li Qianxue's head. "Su Yusin, what are you doing?" Li Qianxue's scalp hurt. She couldn't help but glare at Su Yusin. "What the hell do you want?" "Nothing." Su Yusin squeezed the 2 strands of hair in his palm. He stood up and said, "Mom, have a good rest. I'm going out for a while. It's so late." "Where are you going?" "Mom." Su Yusin took 2 steps back and looked at Li Qianxue. There was obvious pity in his eyes. He knew that when the result came out, Li Qianxue might be the first person who couldn't take it anymore. She might even break down and go crazy. But he was more afraid that Li Qianxue would find out too late. He was afraid that by the time she found out, it would already be too late to make up for it. With Li Qianxue's personality, she would not be able to take it. "I have something to do, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." "Unfortunately, you don't know." Li Qianxue watched her son walk out. Her scalp no longer hurt. She looked at her hair and then at the direction in which Su Yusin had left. What was Su Yusin trying to do? Because of this incident, Li Qianxue and Su Peijian were not in the mood to have fun the next day. The two of them wandered around the neighborhood and finally decided to book plane tickets to go home. Before leaving, Li Qianxue called Su Yusin. He hadn't been seen since he left last night. Now that they were going home, they wanted to ask him if he wanted to go with them. Su Yusin's call did not go through. Li Qianxue frowned. Su Peijian took the phone from her hand. I think he's already gone back to his country. This Yusin, he used to be quite sensible. Who would have thought that the things I've been doing recently are getting more and more out of line? Li Qianxue didn't say anything. It was rare for her not to respond to Su Peijian. Ever since Su Yusin pulled out a strand of her hair last night, she had had a strange feeling. Her intuition told her that something was about to happen, and it was related to her. But she couldn't think of what it could be. Mom? Su Peijian hooked her arm. Let's just book 3 tickets. If he wants to go back, he'll come with us. If he doesn't, we won't wait for him. Instead, he has grown up. Li Qianxue glanced at her daughter and didn't object. She booked 3 plane tickets to return home. The plane tickets were for the next afternoon, so they still had a chance to play here for a day. Before leaving, Li Qianxue finally got in touch with Su Yusin. He said that he had something important to do and would return with them tomorrow. Li Qianxue hung up the phone, but she didn't feel very happy. She could feel that her son had grown up and had begun to have his own thoughts and opinions. The only person she was close to now was her daughter. Lin City. Su Qingsang placed the soft cushion behind Xiang Kaiping. Mom, how do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? With this cushion on my back, how can I feel uncomfortable? Xiang Kaiping had been in the hospital for more than a month. The more she spent time with Su Qingsang, the closer she felt to her daughter. Mom. Although you can do some simple movements with your waist now, you still have to be careful. You have to come to the hospital regularly for checkups and rehabilitation. But we'll have to wait until we get to Rong City. Have the plane tickets been booked? Xiang Kaiping was a little emotional when she thought about returning to Rong City. They had gone around in circles, from Lin City to Rong City, and from Rong City back to Lin City. Yes. Jinyao has everything arranged. Su Qingsang glanced at Hu Jinyao as she spoke. He smiled and walked to the other side to support Xiang Kaiping. Mom, don't worry about the plane. It's all arranged. He asked his assistant to charter the plane and bring 2 doctors and 2 nurses with them. Xiang Caiping's waist injury had not fully recovered, so there were still many things that needed attention. Look, I said I was here to take care of you, but I ended up being taken care of by you. Mom, look at you. I don't like what you said. Su Qingsang helped her sit in the wheelchair. You are my mother. Shouldn't I take care of you? Xiang Kaiping didn't say anything, but she was really touched. Hu Jinyao and Su Qingsang looked at each other and pushed Xiang Kaiping out of the ward together. When they got home, they helped Xiang Kaiping to rest for a while. Su Qingsang came out of the room and looked at Hu Jinyao. When did you book the plane tickets? Why are you being so mysterious? I didn't book a plane ticket. I just chartered the plane. Hu Jinyao could tell Su Qingsang now. The day after tomorrow. So soon? Not soon. Hu Jinyao calculated the time for her. The day after tomorrow is the 13th of January. It won't be too early. The plane is at noon. Mom can sleep a little longer. When we arrive, we have to take Mom for a detailed examination and then help her settle down. After that, we can rest for a while. On the 15th, we can go home to spend the holiday with Grandpa. Su Qingsang nodded. Since Hu Jinyao had arranged everything, she had nothing to worry about. Her face was calm, but there was some hesitation in her eyes. Hu Jinyao took her hand and pulled her into his arms. I heard that Su Yusin also went to the United States. Really? That was good. The family of 3 went to have fun together. Do you want to go? If she wanted to go, he could arrange for someone to send Xiang Kaiping back to Rome City first. He would take Su Qingsang to the United States to see Li Qianxue alone. No need. What can I do if I go? Su Qingsang looked up and sighed softly. If she didn't know, she would be happier. Indeed. Hua Jinyao also admitted this. That is if your father decides to give up revenge. He won't expose that cruel truth after so many years. Su Qingsang didn't look good. She wrapped her arms around Hua Jinyao's waist and rubbed her face against his. He won't, will he? I don't know. He wasn't Su Chenghui. He couldn't guarantee his future. But he could feel that Su Chenghui already regretted it. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. She hoped not. If Su Chenghui gave up revenge, then her choice today would be meaningful. If Su Chenghui didn't give up revenge, then her revenge today would be meaningless. I don't want to. Su Qingsang looked up at him. I already have the best husband in the world and the best mother in the world. Right? Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded and kissed her gently on the lips. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang leaned over to look at him. You will always be by my side, won't you? Of course. Hua Jinyao pressed his chin against the top of her head. I will always, always be by your side. Su Qingsang smiled with satisfaction. Her little face pressed against Hua Jinyao's chest and listened to his heartbeat. She felt that this was good. In order to make her daughter happy, Li Qianxue finally let go of her heart and followed Su Peijian to shop and go shopping. The mother and daughter swept through the pile of trophies. As a result, the suitcases they brought were all full. They bought 2 more suitcases, but it was still too little. Su Yusin came back at this time. He was holding a file bag in his hand. Seeing that Su Peijian was there, he calmly and casually put the file into his suitcase. Yusin, you came at the right time. We have too much luggage. Can your suitcase still fit? Yes. Su Yusin came in a hurry this time and didn't bring many clothes. He helped Su Peijian and Li Qianxue pack their luggage. They found that it was just right. The 3 of them had 6 suitcases. Su Yusin didn't speak. His silence was a little strange. Li Qianxue saw that her son was not right and decided to have a good talk with him when they returned to China. On the 13th of January, Li Qianxue and the other 2 took the plane yesterday afternoon. The plane landed this morning. Returning to Lin City, Su Peijian was a little nervous. Sitting in the car that Su Yusin arranged to pick her up, she looked at Li Qianxue nervously. Mom, will Dad be angry if he knows that I'm back? I don't care if he's angry or not. Li Qianxue had seen through Su Chenghui now. He didn't care about her, so why should she care about him? But Su Peijian wanted to say something. Although she knew that Su Chenghui loved her, she also knew that he had some principles. Sister, Su Yusin suddenly said lightly, why don't you go to a hotel for 2 days first? Or you can live in your apartment in the city. Let's go home first and see what Dad says. If he's not angry, you can go home. Yusin. Li Qianxue glanced at her son. She always felt that her son's arrangement was strange. Just go home directly. I'll see what your father dares to say with your grandfather around. Mom. Su Yusin's voice was faint. Let me go to the United States. Grandpa also supports it. Li Qianxue didn't say anything. Her face was a little ugly as she looked at Su Peijian. She didn't look good either. She pouted and looked at Su Yusin unhappily. But in the end, she was still afraid that Su Chenghui would be unhappy, so she went back to the apartment under her name. After Su Yusin sent her away, he followed Li Qianxue into the car. He raised the glass in the middle. Only the mother and son were left in the back of the car. Su Yusin took out the document from the suitcase and put it in front of Li Qianxue. Mom, look at this. What is this? Li Qianxue looked at the document that was all in English and didn't reach out to take it. Chapter 431. Su Yusin looked at Li Qianxue expressionlessly. Only he knew how fast his heart was beating. How intense. In his eyes, there was a faint anticipation, as well as a reckless madness. Before he went to the United States, he had thought that maybe Hu Jinyao was talking nonsense. Maybe the kids weren't switched at all. He even wanted to find the paternity test report that Hu Jinyao had mentioned. But he couldn't find it. Unable to find it, he had doubts, disbelief, and anticipation in his heart. In fact, he knew better than anyone else that exposing Su Qingsang's identity would hurt Li Qianxue the most, not anyone else. When he did the DNA test for Li Qianxue and Su Peijian, he wondered if he was wrong. Was Hu Jinyao wrong? Could Su Qingsang be wrong? But now, he knew that only one person was at fault. Su Qinghui. Everything started with him. As Su Qinghui's son, he had to make up for his mistake. He wanted to get everything back on track. Paternity test? Whose? Li Qianxue looked at the report, and she had a bad feeling. You'll follow me. Su Yusin's voice was very soft. When I was in the United States, I took your and my sister's hair and did a paternity test. Li Qianxue's expression suddenly changed. Su Yusin, what do you mean? Su Peijian was her biological daughter, and now Su Yusin was doing a paternity test for her and Su Peijian? Was he crazy? Mom. Don't worry. Take a look first. I'll tell you what I mean after you're done. I don't want to see it. Li Qianxue's intuition told her that it was not something good. She refused to look at it. Mom. Are you sure? Are you sure you don't want to watch it? Su Yusin pushed the report a little closer. His gaze was firm as he stared straight at Li Qianxue's face. Li Qianxue thought about how Su Yusin had asked Su Peijian to leave as soon as he returned to Lin City. She also thought about how he had gone to the United States on purpose and how he had said those inexplicable things to her. She stared at him with wide eyes and slowly took the test results from him. She didn't rush to open it, but stared at Su Yusin in front of her. Su Yusin. What do you know? Tell me. Mom, you'd better finish reading first, then listen to me. Su Yusin tried his best to control it, but his voice still trembled. Who would have guessed? Who would have thought that Su Qinghui would do such a thing? Li Qianxue pulled out the report. She kept staring at Su Yusin's face. When the thin piece of paper was pulled out, she lowered her head and her gaze fell on the appraisal report. The appraisal report was done in America, and it was all in English. But for Li Qianxue, none of that was a problem. Her eyes were fixed on the English letters, almost as if she wanted to separate each letter and then reassemble it. But no matter how he disassembled it, no matter how he combined it, content that wouldn't change would never change. Li Qianxue and Su Peijian did not conform to the laws of inheritance, 100% ruled out as mother-daughter relationship. She squeezed the piece of paper tightly and looked up at Su Yusin. What did you do? What did you do? Su Yusin felt as if a huge stone was pressing down on his heart. He reached out and held Li Qianxue's hand tightly. Mom, you shouldn't ask me what I did. You should ask, what did my father do? Li Qianxue was a smart person. She squeezed Su Yusin's hand tightly. She was so hard that she almost pinched her nails into his flesh. What do you mean? What did your father do? Where's my daughter? Peijian isn't my daughter. Then what about my daughter? Where was the daughter she had given birth to after 10 months of pregnancy? If it wasn't for Su Peijian, where would she be now? Her eyes were red. Su Yusin couldn't bear it. He turned his face away. Mom, you've been watching over her all this time. Make it clear, Su Yusin. Su Yusin. Li Qianshue's hand tightened. Su Yusin was in pain, but he didn't pull her hand away. He closed his eyes and suppressed the urge to cry. He turned to look at Li Qianxue and said word by word. Mom. Don't you understand yet? You've been watching over her all this time. She's been living at home. Li Qianshue's hand loosened. Su Yusin's words pointed everything to a very terrible fact. He seemed to have said it the day he went to the United States. She heard it, but she didn't take it to heart. Now, Su Yusin had once again brought this matter to the table. Her faint woman's sixth sense allowed her to guess at this time. But she refused such speculation. She wanted to ask clearly. She wanted to be sure of the final answer. She bit her lip so hard that it almost bled. There was no longer a trace of elegance on her well-maintained face. There was only shock, disbelief, and rejection. Su Yusin. Make it clear. What do you want to say? What do you want to say? Say it. Mom. Su Yusin chuckled. There was mockery, helplessness, bitterness, pity, and sympathy in that smile. Why do you still have to deceive yourself? You're so smart. You've already guessed it, haven't you? Impossible. Li Qianxue closed her eyes. In the blink of an eye, many images and many things flashed through her mind. She didn't believe it. How could she believe it? Su Yusin didn't give her a chance. He held her shoulders and stared at her face, his eyes full of sympathy. Mom. 25 years ago, the child you gave birth to was replaced by your father. He took that woman's child back and treated it as your child. And your child was taken away by him. I don't know what happened later, but in the end, he still took the child back and raised it in the Su family. But that child was no longer the granddaughter of the Li family. She was no longer the daughter of the Su family. That child became the illegitimate daughter of the Su family. It was Su Qingsang. Li Qianshue's face was so pale that there was no trace of blood. Her whole body froze there, sluggish, and unable to move. Su Yusin couldn't bear to continue, but he had to continue. Mom. Su Qingsang is your daughter. She's my sister, my biological sister. Mom. It's all true. Hua Jinyao found out about his sister's background and went to his father to question him. I just heard it. Mom. Did you hear it clearly? Su Qingsang is your daughter. Su Peixian, she is, Su Yusin couldn't bear to say more. Once some things were uncovered, only the true ugliness would be revealed. He knew the result, but he had no choice but to uncover that piece of cloth. Li Qianxue had been listening to Su Yusin. Su Yusin was afraid that she wouldn't believe him, so he repeated what Hua Jinyao had said to Su Qinghui. Mom. The facts were clear. I know this may be hard for you. But the truth is, stop the car. Stop the car. Li Qianxue suddenly moved. She even forgot that the car was still moving and reached out to pull the door. Su Yusin quickly stopped her. Mom, what are you doing? I'm going to find Su Qinghui. I'm going to see Su Qinghui. Mom, stop the car. I'm going to find him. I'm going to find him and ask him. Li Qianshue's eyes were a little blank and empty. There was also disbelief and shock. She didn't believe it. She didn't want to believe a single word. Mom. It's no use looking for him. He won't admit it. Hua Jinyao had put all the evidence in front of Su Qinghui. Did he admit it? Not at all. He would never admit it. Because this was his revenge. How could he admit to Li Qianxue that he had done something wrong? Li Qianxue stopped moving and leaned back in the chair weakly. She felt a sharp pain in her heart. Someone was holding a knife and stabbing her heart again and again. She couldn't stand the pain anymore. She sat up and could hardly sit still. It hurt. It really hurt. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe a single word. Her voice was soft and trembling. Mom. Whether you believe it or not, it's the truth. Su Qingsang is your daughter. She's my sister. Su Yusin reached out and held her. His eyes were firm. Mom, I've already asked the driver to go to my sister's house. She's my sister. We're going to take her home. Li Qianxue lowered her head again. Su Yusin felt hot tears fall on the back of his hand. The temperature almost burned him. He could still feel Li Qianxue trembling. She had suffered a blow. He knew. But such a blow would come sooner or later. If he hadn't heard the conversation between Su Chenghui and Hu Jinyao, he could pretend that nothing had happened. If he hadn't done a paternity test for Su Peijian and Li Qianxue, he could pretend that nothing had happened. But he couldn't. He couldn't just turn a blind eye to it. He couldn't let Su Chenghui keep deceiving them. More importantly, he couldn't still treat Su Qingsang as an illegitimate daughter, knowing that she was his biological sister. After Li Qianxue's heart ached, her head felt like it was about to explode. Countless images and conversations flashed through her mind. Her argument with Su Chenghui. That day, Su Chenghui kept saying that he didn't have other women. He was a proud man. She knew that. So when he said that he didn't have other women, she didn't believe him at the time. She only thought that he was making excuses for himself. Now, after listening to Su Yusin's words, she understood everything. Su Chenghui didn't have other women. He really didn't betray her. He didn't have a third woman. But what he did hurt her more than the fact that he had a woman outside. Her heart began to hurt again. Li Qianxue was in so much pain that her whole body was trembling. She leaned weakly on Su Yusin's shoulder. Mom, calm down. Su Yusin held her and didn't let her break down like this. Calm down. We still have to pick up my sister. Li Qianxue shook her head gently. Her eyes were blurred by tears. She couldn't see clearly, and she couldn't see clearly. She couldn't control her body's reaction. It was like she couldn't control her heartache. Chapter 432. How could he, using all her strength, she could only squeeze out these few words. She was in so much pain that she almost fainted. Her fingernails dug into her palms and almost bled. How could he? How could he? How could he? She murmured, each word heavier than the last. In the end, she almost shouted, how could he? Mom! Su Yusin saw that her hand was bleeding. He hurriedly tried to grab her hand, but found that he couldn't. Mom, don't be like this. Su Yusin was frightened by Li Qianxue. Calm down. Don't be like this. Li Qianxue was in extreme pain. She only saw a white light in front of her. Su Yusin was frightened and watched her go into shock. Mom! Mom, he regretted it. He shouldn't have said, Mom. Li Qianxue woke up slowly. She felt as if all the strength in her body had been drained. Her palm was still bleeding, but she couldn't care less. She grabbed Su Yusin's collar and asked, where is she? You said to take me to her. Where is she? We'll be there soon. Su Yusin took a tissue and wiped the blood off her palm. Mom, calm down. You'll scare my sister. According to Hu Jinyao, Su Qingsang might have known about it long ago, but she obviously didn't intend to acknowledge them. Li Qianxue closed her eyes. She wanted to calm down, but there was no way. How could he calm down? Who could remain calm? Li Qianxue thought of the last time she met Su Qingsang, when she went to the Su family to pay New Year's greetings. She recalled how she had gone to the hospital to avenge Su Peijian. At that time, she almost hit her. The last time they were together was such an unpleasant scene. Ah, Li Qianxue screamed. It was too unbearable. It was really unbearable. Her daughter. That was her daughter. She thought of Su Qingsang smiling and giving her a small gift, and the obvious flattery and weakness in her eyes. However, he had asked his assistant to throw the gift away. She couldn't think of any warm scenes between her and Su Qingsang. Not at all. The more he thought about it, the more painful it became. Li Qianxue held her head, completely unable to vent the waves of overly excited emotions in her heart. Mom. Calm down. Su Yusen's impression of Li Qianxue had always been elegant and noble. He had never seen Li Qianxue like this. Calm down, you'll scare my sister like this. Li Qianxue finally calmed down a little after hearing Su Yusen's words. She slowly raised her head and looked at him. Do you think we should go and see her now? Yes. Let's go see her now. Su Yusen gave her an affirmative look. He had already arranged it. Today, he was going to take Li Qianxue to see Su Qingsang. We'll be there soon. We'll be able to see my sister soon. Mom, calm down. Otherwise, you'll scare my sister. Although Su Qingsang might not be scared at all. But he had to calm Li Qianxue down. Li Qianxue blinked. She had finally received a message from her son. She hastily wiped her face and said, "All right. I don't like this. I don't like this." She wiped away the tears on her face and the blood on her palms. She looked at Su Yusen and asked, "Do I look ugly like this?" "No." Su Yusen wanted to cry. "Mom, you're the most beautiful." Li Qianxue was not happy because of her son's praise. Instead, she thought of another thing. What about her? Does she know? Will she not want to acknowledge me? She was still very young. Li Qianxue was only in her 40s. She remembered those things, just like Su Qingsang remembered her childhood. She also remembered some things with Su Qingsang. What was the most? Ignored. She couldn't see her and treated her as if she didn't exist. Li Qianxue searched all her memories but couldn't find a single memory of her being good to Su Qingsang. The only time was when she was 18 years old. Su Qinghui wanted to buy a house for Su Qingsang, and she said it casually. Since the house was bought, the car was also bought for her. She was going to leave the Su family anyway, so she didn't mind spending more money. In her opinion, the Su family had so many cars. It was nothing to buy an illegitimate daughter a car. However, she didn't buy it in the end. Su Qingsang said that buying a car as soon as she went to school was too high profile. She didn't buy a car until she graduated from college and worked. What was she thinking at that time? An illegitimate daughter was an illegitimate daughter. How petty of him. Buying a car could scare her like that. But in her heart, she felt that Su Qingsang was sensible and knew how to keep a low profile. However, if she didn't know how to keep a low profile, maybe with her personality, she wouldn't have been able to tolerate her. She couldn't think about it. She couldn't think about those past events at this time. Thinking about it made her feel very painful. Li Qianxue's eyes were tightly closed. What was even more painful was that she found that she couldn't remember more things. She couldn't remember anything else about Su Qingsang. All the memories of children growing up in her memory included Su Yusen, but more of Su Peijian. She remembered everything about Su Peijian growing up. But she didn't remember anything about Su Qingsang. She suddenly grabbed Su Yusen's arm. What should I do? Yusen. What should I do? Mom. What's wrong? I can't remember what she looked like when she was a child. Su Yusen was speechless. Not to mention Li Qianxue, his memory of Su Qingsang was also very vague. She had no sense of existence since she was a child. She was like a shadow in the Su family. If the Su family hadn't taken the initiative to ask, she wouldn't even have appeared. How did she grow up? Why can't I remember? Thinking of this, Li Qianxue felt a sharp pain in her heart again. How much had she missed? Mom, don't be like this. It's okay. It's okay. We still have a long time in the future. Don't be like this. Li Qianxue didn't speak. She didn't know what to say. His mind was in a mess and was in a mess. She couldn't think at all. She just wanted to see Su Qingsang as soon as possible. The car stopped downstairs of Su Qingsang's apartment while they were talking. Su Yusin got out of the car first, but Li Qianxue didn't even have the courage to get out. It was a long flight of more than 10 hours. From abroad to Lin City. She should have been exhausted, but now she only wanted to see her daughter as soon as possible. Su Qingsang, who was originally her daughter but had been ignored by her for more than 20 years. Li Qianxue almost couldn't stand steadily when she got out of the car. It took a lot of effort to stabilize her body. Su Yusin had been holding her and was very worried about her condition. Mom. Do you want to go back first? Li Qianxue was so excited now. He was afraid that she would lose control of her emotions later. If he remembered correctly, Su Qingsang was still with Xiang Kaiping. Li Qianxue naturally knew what he knew. She knew that Xiang Kaiping had returned and that Xiang Kaiping had mistaken Su Qingsang as her daughter and recognized her. I'm fine. Those things didn't matter. No matter who came, she would go and bring Su Qingsang back to the Su family today. Su Yusin also knew that he couldn't stop Li Qianxue from going up today, and he didn't think about stopping her. The two of them went upstairs together. Su Yusin glanced at Li Qianxue and knocked on the door first. There was no response. Su Yusin pressed the doorbell again. Still no one answered. His eyebrows twitched, and he took out his phone to call Su Qingsang. Today was the weekend, and he thought she would be at home. He was on the phone, and Li Qianxue looked at him nervously. Her eyes were full of nervousness and confusion. Sister. Where are you? As soon as the phone was connected, Su Yusin couldn't wait to speak. His tone was a little anxious. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao had already boarded the plane. 2 nurses and a doctor were putting a cushion behind Xiang Kaiping. Su Qingsang had just said goodbye to Shi Mengwan, who had come to see her off. Shi Mengwan was no longer surprised by Hu Jinyao's wealth. She said that she must pick a time to go to Rong City and make money from Hu Jinyao. Okay. You are welcome to come anytime. I'm just afraid that you won't come. Don't worry. With a rich young lady like you in Rong City, I will definitely come for money. Shi Mengwan held her hand. I'm just afraid that you won't find me annoying when the time comes. Don't worry. Auntie wants you to come. Xiang Kaiping really liked Shi Mengwan. This girl's personality was too good. Okay. Auntie. I will come when the time comes. They chatted and laughed. It was almost time to leave. Shi Mengwan left. A group of people escorted Xiang Kaiping to the plane. Su Qingsang was about to ask Hu Jinyao when the plane would take off. Her cell phone rang. Yusin. Su Qingsang was a little surprised. She didn't quite understand why Su Yusin suddenly called her. I am at the airport. I am going back to Rong City. What? Su Yusin's eyes widened. He couldn't help but look at Li Qianxue. You are going back to Rong City with Hu Jinyao? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. What's the matter? Sister. You. Su Yusin still wanted to say something, but Li Qianxue had already snatched his phone away. Su Qingsang, come back here. Su Qingsang suddenly heard Li Qianxue's voice. Her hand trembled, and the phone almost fell. She didn't expect to suddenly hear Li Qianxue's voice. Holding onto her phone, she stood there in a daze, unable to move. Qingsang. Come back. Li Qianxue didn't hear her response. She didn't know if Su Qingsang knew. She only knew that she wanted to see her daughter now. Now, immediately. Come back. Su Qingsang blinked, as if she had finally found her voice. She wanted to call her aunt like she used to, but she couldn't. Qingsang, come back. Li Qianxue seemed to realize that she was too emotional. She softened her voice a little. I am your mother. I am your mother. Just one sentence, and Li Qianxue couldn't stop crying. She leaned against Su Yusin weakly and grabbed his arm tightly, using this action to soothe her emotions that were about to go out of control. Come back. I am your mother. I am your mother. Su Qingsang's hands began to tremble. She knew. She actually knew. Chapter 433. Su Qingsang sat there in a daze. Hua Jinyao's face was magnified in front of her, and she could barely hold the phone in her hand. On the other end of the phone, Li Qianxue didn't hear her voice. She was a little anxious. Qingsang, don't go. I'll wait for you here. Come back quickly. Come back now. Hua Jinyao couldn't hear the voice on the other end of the phone, but he knew it was Su Yusin calling her. He looked at her and moved his lips silently. What's wrong? Come back. Li Qianxue's voice was still ringing in his ears. It was filled with eagerness and anticipation. Qingsang, what's wrong? Xiang Kaiping also noticed that something was wrong with Su Qingsang. She knew Su Yusin. He was Su Qinghui's youngest son. Why was he looking for Su Qingsang? Did something happen to the Su family? Su Qingsang's lips moved. She received a message from the control tower. Tell their captain to prepare for takeoff. The stewardess used a rather sweet voice to remind them to fasten their seatbelts and return to their seats in preparation for takeoff. Su Qingsang blinked, looked at Hua Jinyao, and then looked at Xiang Kaiping. It was hard for her to make a choice. She had never faced such a difficult moment in her life. Her lips were pressed into a straight line. The palm holding the phone tightened, and her body trembled slightly. She almost wanted to rush out of the plane and find Li Qianxue. Qingsang. It's fine if you don't come back. You stay at the airport and don't move. Mommy will come and pick you up now. Li Qianxue's voice rang out again. Su Qingsang blinked and felt like crying. On the other side, Xiang Kaiping could no longer sit still. She remembered to come and see her. She looked at Xiang Kaiping and thought of Li Qianxue. His heart was in turmoil. How should she choose? If she stayed and reconciled with Li Qianxue, she would definitely hurt Xiang Kaiping. She had already been hurt by Su Qinghui, and now Li Qianxue's daughter had to stab her in the back again. If you don't stay, leave. She would hurt Li Qianxue's heart. She had been raising other men's women for more than 20 years. Now she wanted to recognize herself. But she had misgivings. Qingsang, did you hear me? Li Qianxue was still calling her. Su Qingsang could hear the sobs in her voice. At the same time, Xiang Kaiping was already sitting in front of her. She looked at her, her gentle eyes full of worry. Su Qingsang looked at Xiang Caiping's worried eyes and closed them. I'm sorry. She heard herself say the words in a very soft voice. Then he hung up. Qingsang. Xiang Kaiping looked worried. Are you okay? I'm fine. Su Qingsang smiled stiffly. I'm fine. Qingsang. Xiang Kaiping did not believe it at all. Su Qingsang forced herself to smile. I'm really fine. Yusin blamed me for not telling him before I left. She's throwing a tantrum. Xiang Kaiping stopped talking. She could feel that Su Qingsang was very close to her brother. To be honest, she did not have a good impression of the Su family. No matter which one it was. How could Su Qingsang not know that? She patted Xiang Kaiping on the shoulder. Mom, you should rest. Just take a nap and we'll be there. Su Qingsang's voice was slightly disguised. Xiang Kaiping didn't think much of it. She thought that she didn't want to upset her, so she didn't mention Su Yusin. She returned to her seat and sat down. Xiao Ning and Xiao Yu sat on her left and right, chatting with her. Hua Jinyao sat next to Su Qingsang. He held her hand and found that her hand was as cold as ice. Are you okay? His voice was very soft. Su Qingsang glanced at him, moved her lips, and only said 4 words. She didn't make a sound, but Hua Jinyao saw it clearly. She said that she was back. Who was she? Li Qianxue. Su Qingsang hugged him, her face pressed tightly against his chest. Her voice was very soft. She knows. She knows. She wants me to stay. Her voice was full of struggle. Hua Jinyao tightened his arms around her waist. You refused her. What else? Su Qingsang looked up at him. Her voice was very soft, but there were tears in the corners of her eyes. What about her? She was referring to Xiang Kaiping. Hua Jinyao looked into her eyes and couldn't answer her question. Xiang Kaiping and Su Qingsang had been together for a few months, and they had developed a mother-daughter relationship. Su Qingsang didn't want to hurt Xiang Kaiping, so she hung up the phone in a hurry. But her action would definitely hurt Li Qianxue. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft, so soft that Hua Jinyao could only hear it clearly with his lips pressed against hers. I hurt her. What should I do? I hurt her. She refused to stay. She didn't get off the plane. She didn't dare to think about Li Qianxue's feelings. She wanted to cry, but she couldn't even cry now, because if she cried, it would arouse Xiang Caiping's suspicion. Hua Jinyao hugged her tightly, and the flight attendant was still reminding them of the precautions before takeoff. Hua Jinyao wrapped his arms around Su Qingsang's body and felt her trembling in his arms. Her eyes were full of struggle, and her heart was full of struggle. If she hadn't misunderstood that Xiang Kaiping was her mother, if she hadn't been with Xiang Kaiping for a few months, at this time, she would have rushed off the plane without a care. Hua Jinyao didn't need to look at Su Qingsang's eyes to feel her current state. He glanced in Xiang Caiping's direction. She was chatting with 2 nurses. From time to time, she glanced in their direction. When they saw Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang hugging each other, there were faint smiles and teasing in their eyes. In Xiang Caiping's opinion, her daughter and son-in-law had a good relationship. That made her happier than anything else. But only Hua Jinyao knew that Su Qingsang, whose body was covered by him, was trembling at this moment. She didn't cry, nor did she shed tears. But seeing Su Qingsang like this made his heart ache even more. He couldn't blame her for making the wrong choice. No matter which side she chose, she would hurt the other side. If it was Hua Jinyao. He didn't know how to choose. He turned his eyes and gave Yang Wencheng, who was behind him, a look. Yang Wencheng got up. Hua Jinyao wrapped his arms around Su Qingsang's and pressed her body tightly into his arms. With his other hand, he took out his phone and typed a line of words. His movements were very light, and his hand was placed behind Su Qingsang, so Su Qingsang didn't see it. Yang Wencheng, however, saw it clearly. Yang Wencheng looked at him with a shocked expression. After getting an affirmative answer from him, he quietly got up and walked to the front. Hua Jinyao still had his arms around Su Qingsang's waist. He gently patted her back and said, if you want to go back, we'll stop. No, Su Qingsang said in a very low voice. Her breath brushed against Hua Jinyao's face. No. Why not? You can go back if you want. Su Qingsang bit her lip and tightened her arms around Hua Jinyao's waist. What about her? What about Grandpa? You've already told them that we're going back. She had never been willful since she was a child. She felt that she didn't have the right to be willful. She was used to suppressing herself and restraining herself. Even at a moment like this. Most importantly, she really didn't want to hurt Xiang Kaiping. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry to inform you that there's a small problem with the plane. We need to repair the plane now. The specific flight time will be arranged by the mechanic. Hearing this, Su Qingsang suddenly widened her eyes. She looked up at Hu Jinyao, and he was also looking at her. Su Qingsang bit her lip hard and said, "This." Hu Jinyao put his arms around her waist, turned his face, and gently kissed her on the forehead. "You see, God has made a choice for you. Go and see her." Xiang Kaiping was also stunned. She didn't expect the plane to break down. "Jinyao. Why did the plane break down? How long will it take?" "I don't know. Why don't we go back and rest first?" Hu Jinyao looked at the time. "This place is very close to the villa I bought for Qingsang. Mom, why don't we go there and rest for a while?" "Okay." Only then did Xiang Kaiping realize that Su Qingsang had been snuggling in Hu Jinyao's arms. "Child, get off the plane first. You can hug her as you like when we get home. It's okay. I like her like this." Hu Jinyao put his arms around Su Qingsang's waist tightly and looked at Xiang Kaiping. "Look, I'll ask Wenchang to take you back first. Qingsang and I will talk to the airport staff and see when the next flight will be." "Okay." Xiang Kaiping didn't think too much. Yang Wenchang took her, Xiao Ning, and Xiao Yu off the plane. Su Qingsang even showed her face when she left and waved at her nonchalantly. When Xiang Caiping's figure disappeared in front of her, she grabbed Hu Jinyao's arm and said, "Hu Jinyao. Let's go. I'll take you." Su Qingsang's heart was beating fast. She wanted to see Li Qianxue. "But, I'm a little scared." Hu Jinyao looked at her and couldn't help but lean over and plant a kiss on her cheek. "Don't be scared. I'll go with you." Su Qingsang's heart was still beating fast, but Hu Jinyao's eyes calmed her down. "Let's go." She wanted to see Li Qianxue. She really wanted to. Li Qianxue, who was at the door of Su Qingsang's apartment, had already fallen to the ground. "Mom." Su Yusin was anxious and quickly helped her up. "Mom, get up. What did sister say? Did she come back?" Li Qianxue didn't move. She clenched her phone tightly, her face full of tears. "She didn't come back. She left." "Mom?" Su Yusin was stunned. He thought that Su Qingsang would be very happy to recognize Li Qianxue. "I know. She won't come back. She won't recognize me either." Li Qianxue's face was full of despair. Su Yusin wanted to help her up, but he couldn't. "She hates me. I know. I know it all. She didn't treat her well at all. Su Qingsang deserved to hate her. She won't. Sister won't." Su Yusin believed that Su Qingsang wasn't that kind of person. He reached out and pulled Li Qianxue up. "Mom. Don't be like this. Let's go find her. Isn't she going to Rong City? We'll go to Rong City too. Let's go find her now." Li Qianxue stood up. Her legs were still a little weak. She shook her head. "It's useless. It's useless. She won't recognize me." Chapter 434. Li Qianxue thought of the time when Su Qingsang was in trouble before. She even secretly played some tricks. She wanted Su Qingsang to leave Lin City. She couldn't even think about it. Just thinking about it made her go crazy. "She hates me. She hates me. Mom." Su Yusin was about to cry. He hugged Li Qianxue. "Don't be like this. Let's go find her now. I believe she will recognize you. Li Qianxue didn't listen at all. She really couldn't find a reason for Su Qingsang to forgive her. If she were Su Qingsang, she probably wouldn't acknowledge such a mother, would she? Mom. Let's go. Su Yusin took her to the elevator. Li Qianxue suddenly waved his hand away. Suddenly she stood up. Her cold and elegant face was full of determination. Su Yusin was startled by her actions. Mom? What are you, Yusin? We are going to Rong City. I'm going to look for your sister. Li Qianxue took a deep breath to calm herself down. All right. Let's go now. But... Li Qianxue's voice turned cold, and her eyes were full of hatred. Before we go to Rong City, we have to go home first. Mom? Su Yusin looked at her expression and seemed to know what she was going to do. Let's go. After all, Li Qianxue was someone who had been through a lot. She had already calmed down. She wanted to find her daughter, but before that, she didn't want to let go of the culprit who caused her and her daughter to not know each other. Even if that person was the man she had loved for more than 20 years. This time, she would not let it go just like that. Old Master Li looked at Su Chenghui in front of him and then at the chessboard between them. What's wrong with Chenghui today? He seemed absent-minded. This isn't your style, is it? Su Chenghui looked up at the old man, and then his eyes fell on the chessboard. Only then did he realize that he had placed 2 pieces in the wrong place. It's nothing. Picking up the 3rd chess piece, Su Chenghui suppressed the uneasiness in his heart. He had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. Old Master Li watched him place a chess piece and followed suit. He didn't rush to land on the chessboard. Instead, he looked at Su Chenghui. Qianxue has been in the United States for many days. Now, Yusin was going to accompany her. It's the new year, and the house is cold and empty. There are only the 2 of us. Su Chenghui had nothing to say. In the past, Li Qianxue wouldn't lose her temper with him for long. But this time, because of Su Peixian, he had been upset until now. Your wife and children have run away. Why didn't you call them back? Putting down the chess piece, Old Master Li's voice sounded gentle, but there was a hint of accusation in it. Su Chenghui bit his lip and felt a little guilty. Since Qianxue wants to go out to play, let her play for a few days before coming back. Old Master Li didn't say anything. Su Chenghui had lost the game. Looks like you're not in the mood to play chess with me today. Old Master Li looked at Su Chenghui and sighed. He was about to ask someone to come in and collect the chessboard. The door of the house was pushed open forcefully. As the cold wind blew in, the old man glanced at the door. Li Qianxue stood there with Su Yusin by her side. Both of them didn't look too good. You're back. Old Master Li was still very happy to see his daughter. Why didn't you tell me? I could have sent someone to pick you up. You're back. Su Chenghui saw Li Qianxue and stood up. He looked at Su Yusin and said, Yusin, why didn't you tell me before you went to the United States? Li Qianxue walked towards Su Chenghui step by step. Su Chenghui was stunned by the look in her eyes. Su Yusin's footsteps moved, but he stood there and didn't move. Li Qianxue stared at Su Chenghui. Her hands hanging by her side were tightly clenched into fists. Her palm, which had been bleeding from her pinch before, was bleeding again. Old Master Li and Su Chenghui both looked at her face. Only Su Yusin saw the blood dripping from Li Qianxue's palm. Mom, he called out to Li Qianxue. But Li Qianxue turned a deaf ear. She had already walked in front of Su Chenghui. Su Chenghui had never seen Li Qianxue like this. His heart was beating a little fast, and he felt a little uneasy. Qianxue. You. Pa. A slap on the face. It landed heavily on Su Chenghui's face. Li Qianxue's palm was bleeding. With this slap, Su Chenghui's face was also stained with blood. This slap was hard and hard, even harder than when she misunderstood that he had a woman. Su Chenghui was stunned. Li Qianxue, you, with another slap, Li Qianxue slapped him for the second time. Her anger was so great that her whole body was trembling. Her palms were numb because of these two slaps, but she didn't think it was enough. When she raised her hand and was about to slap him for the third time, old Master Li stood up. Qianxue, what are you doing? Li Qianxue panted heavily. Her palms hurt, and her heart hurt even more. She couldn't breathe when she thought of Su Qingsang's apology when she hung up the phone. When she thought of how she had ignored Su Qingsang for so many years, she felt as if her heart had been stabbed by a knife. Her hand was still in midair. Looking at Su Chenghui's bloody face, she clenched and loosened her fists, loosened and clenched them again. In the end, she put her hand down bit by bit. She stared at Su Chenghui and spoke word by word in an extremely slow tone. Su Chenghui. Let's get a divorce. Su Chenghui's face was still burning with pain. Because of Li Qianxue's words, his expression was momentarily stunned. Su Chenghui. Let's get a divorce. Li Qianxue said it again. When she said those 4 words, she could feel that her whole body was relaxed. It was as if she had thrown away a burden that had been weighing on her for many years. She stared at Su Chenghui's face and spoke very slowly, but quite firmly. Su Chenghui, this time, no matter who says it. I'm going to divorce you. Qianxue. Old Master Li looked at his daughter. He finally saw that his daughter's palm was actually bleeding. He quickly walked in front of Li Qianxue. What's wrong with you? What happened? Li Qianxue didn't answer his question. She just stared at Su Chenghui, firmly and closely staring at this man. This man she had loved and begged for more than 20 years. She wanted to firmly remember how cruel, heartless, and vicious this man was. Qianxue. What happened? Old Master Li couldn't get an answer from his daughter, so he went to see Su Yusin. Su Yusin had already entered the door. When he saw the doubt in old Master Li's eyes, he didn't say a word. Qianxue. Old Master Li remembered that Li Qianxue had gone to the United States to see Su Peixian. Could it be that something had happened to Su Peixian? Li Qianxue was in no mood to see her father at this time. At this time, there was only Su Chenghui in her eyes. Su Chenghui looked at Li Qianxue. His faint premonition had come true. When he met Li Qianxue's gaze, he suddenly realized one thing. Li Qianxue was going to give up on him. She didn't want him anymore. This realization made Su Chenghui panic. He didn't even have the time to ask what made Li Qianxue like this. Qianxue. You're not calm now. We'll talk when you calm down. Su Chenghui. I hate you. Li Qianxue interrupted him. She looked at him, and the little things between the two of them over the years flashed through her mind. I really hate you. I have never hated you as much as I do now. She really hated him. Do you know how much I hate you? If I had a knife in my hand, I swear that I would kill you right now without hesitation. Her voice was a little hoarse. She was too tired after the long journey. After a long flight, she found out that the daughter she had raised for more than 20 years was not her own. But now, her own daughter didn't want her anymore and left. Li Qianxue was able to hold on until now without going crazy or breaking down because Su Yusin had been with her. It was because she still held on to a glimmer of faith. She still wanted to see her real, biological daughter. Those thoughts supported her and kept her from collapsing. But at this time, those emotions urgently needed an outlet. I really, really want to kill you. Cut into pieces. Li Qianxue's words stunned Su Chenghui again. He looked at Li Qianxue, and a possibility flashed through his mind. You, Li Qianxue, did she know? But how could it be? The panic in his heart grew. Su Chenghui didn't know how to react at this time. Su Chenghui. I can forgive you if you don't love me. I can forgive you if you hurt me. But you shouldn't have lied to me. Not only had she lied to him. What Su Chenghui had done. It had gone far beyond the scope of the word, lie. Old Master Li looked at Li Qianxue and sensitively felt that something seemed to be wrong. Qianxue, what on earth is going on? What happened? He knew how much his daughter loved Su Chenghui. For more than 20 years, the couple had treated each other with respect on the surface, but he more or less knew what was going on inside. He had always disliked Su Chenghui treating his daughter like this. But he always thought that they were married anyway. As time passed, Su Chenghui would slowly see the good in his daughter. In recent years, the relationship between his son-in-law and daughter seemed to have warmed up a lot. But now listening to his daughter, it seemed that it was not the case at all. Li Qianxue closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she still couldn't suppress the rolling emotions in her chest. You know. How could it be? Su Chenghui suddenly looked at Su Yusin. What on earth was going on? How did Li Qianxue know? Li Qianxue sneered. Her smile was cold. Do you think you can hide it from everyone for a lifetime? Do you think you can lie for a lifetime? Su Chenghui, in your dreams. Old Master Li looked at Li Qianxue, then at Su Chenghui, and finally back at his daughter. What on earth is going on? Tell me clearly. Li Qianxue sneered. She stretched out her hand and pointed at Su Chenghui. Ask him, Dad. You can ask this good son-in-law of yours. What did he do? Old Master Li's sharp eyes fell on Su Chenghui. Su Chenghui's legs were a little weak. He almost couldn't sit still. Chapter 435. He was shocked and looked at Li Qianxue in disbelief. He couldn't understand why she would know. Qianxue. You really know. Don't call me that. Li Qianxue pretended to be fierce. What? Do you think your secret will always be a secret? Do you think no one will know what you have done? Do you think you can play with me for the rest of my life? Really? I didn't. His impulse had led to this result. Su Chenghui had long regretted it. He really regretted it. But the more he regretted it, the more he couldn't say it. The more he regretted it, the more he wanted to hide it. He knew that he couldn't get Li Qianxue's forgiveness, so he just wanted to hide it until the end. Old Master Li couldn't stand it. They all knew what had happened, but he didn't. All of you, tell me clearly. What exactly happened? Li Qianxue sneered. Su Chenghui dared to do it, but she didn't dare to say it. She closed her eyes for a moment. It was only then that she remembered. In this family, apart from her, the person who loved Su Peijian the most was Old Master Li. Thinking of this, she hated Su Chenghui even more. She couldn't wait to drink his blood and eat his flesh. Tell me, Su Chenghui. Tell Dad all about the good things you've done. Su Chenghui lowered his head and almost didn't dare to meet the father and daughter's eyes. He looked guilty. It was obvious that something was wrong. Old Master Li suddenly turned to look at Su Yusin. Yusin. What is going on? Tell me. Su Yusin was about to speak when his cell phone rang. It was Su Qingsang. Sister. Yusin, where are you? It's me. Su Yusin's call made Su Chenghui and Li Qianxue look at him. Especially Li Qianxue. Is that Qingsang calling? Is it? Su Yusin nodded and pressed the speaker button. Sister, I am at home. You. I'm coming. Wait for me. I'll be right there. Su Qingsang had just arrived home and found that Su Yusin and Li Qianxue were not there. She panicked. She thought that Li Qianxue and Su Yusin had left. It wasn't until now that Su Qingsang was willing to admit that she really really miss Li Qianxue. Don't worry, maybe your mother is looking for you. Hua Jinyao took out her phone as he spoke. Call Su Yusin and ask him where they are. Now that Su Yusin said that he was at home, she couldn't help but want to confirm again. Which house are you at? The Su family. Really? Alright, I'll be right there. Tell mom to wait for me. Su Qingsang didn't have time to say anything else. She hung up the phone and ran towards the elevator. Hua Jinyao held her hand and hugged her gently when he saw her anxious expression. Don't worry. Don't panic. She's right there. She won't leave. Su Qingsang didn't say anything but kept nodding. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang suddenly raised her hand and grabbed the front of his shirt. I'm very nervous. What should I do? Hua Jinyao stroked her face with his hand, and there was obvious love in his eyes. Don't be nervous. Believe me, she's more nervous than you are. Huh? Su Qingsang was stunned. Hua Jinyao put his hand on her shoulder to give her strength and confidence. Trust me, she's really more nervous than you are. So you can't be nervous now. You have to calm down. Otherwise, you'll scare her. Okay. I'm not nervous. Su Qingsang thought so, but she still couldn't help it. Her breathing became a little heavy. Hua Jinyao saw this and lowered his head to kiss her. He sealed her feelings with a kiss and kissed away her nervousness. Su Qingsang's heartbeat slowly calmed down in his kiss. The elevator arrived. Su Qingsang buried her face in his chest and gently rubbed against it. Thank you, Hua Jinyao. You're welcome. I took advantage of you too. Hearing this, Su Qingsang couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. This guy was really, let's go. Let's go see her. Okay. Su Qingsang calmed herself down. She only wanted to see Li Qianxue now. As for Xiang Kaiping and the Hua family in Rong City, she couldn't care less about them at this time. What did you say? Li Qianxue rushed in front of Su Yusin. Say it again. Mom. Sister didn't get on the plane. She's coming over now. Li Qianxue's body froze. She pressed her hand to her heart. It was beating very hard. She's really coming over now. Li Qianxue couldn't believe it. Wasn't Su Qingsang on the plane? Yes. She's coming over now. Su Yusin stepped forward and put his hand on Li Qianxue's shoulder. Mom, calm down. Sister doesn't hate you. Look, isn't she coming to see you now? Li Qianxue couldn't say anything. She could only keep nodding. Old Master Li looked at the mother and son who were hugging each other in front of him, and then looked at Su Chenghui, who had his head down and looked as if he had suffered a blow. What the hell is going on? Who can tell me? He looked at Su Yusin. Yusin, you tell me. What the hell is going on? Sister is coming. Su Peijian. Isn't she in the United States? She's back in China. When did this happen? Su Yusin glanced at Li Qianxue. She was still very emotional at this time. She glanced at Su Chenghui coldly. When she met Su Yusin's gaze, she spoke quite calmly. Tell your grandfather. He'll know sooner or later. Su Chenghui closed his eyes weakly. He couldn't face the next situation. That was what he had been running away from, but in the end, he found that he couldn't escape at all. Su Yusin glanced at Su Chenghui. His lips were pursed into a straight line. He was silent for nearly a minute and looked at Old Master Li. In fact, this matter was quite difficult to talk about. Only now did Su Yusin realize that it was far more difficult to talk about this matter to Li Qianxue than to Old Master Li. Grandfather, you're getting old. No matter what you'll hear later. Please take care of your health. I'm an old bag of bones. Why can't I hold on? Just tell me, what's the matter? Su Yusin glanced at him and turned to get the medicine that old Master Li often used. Su Qinghui didn't speak during the process. It wasn't until he saw Su Yusin take the medicine that he finally moved. He walked in front of old Master Li, his shoulders drooping. "Dad. Let me say it." Because of his actions, Li Qianxue curled the corners of her mouth, revealing an extremely mocking smile. Su Yusin had already walked in front of old Master Li and prepared the medicine in his hand. Su Qinghui closed his eyes. He turned his head and glanced at Li Qianxue. She stood there, her features as bright and beautiful as ever. A long-distance flight of more than 10 hours, plus the shock of knowing that Su Peixian wasn't her biological daughter. It made her look a little disheveled at this moment, losing her usual elegance. She curled the corners of her lips and looked at him mockingly. That gaze made his heart sting. His lips moved towards her. He had thousands of words to say, but at this moment, he couldn't say a word. He turned his face and faced old Master Li again. His head was still lowered. 25 years ago. The day Qianxue gave birth. "Dad, you happened to be away." Qianxue was in a coma due to dystocia. Li Qianxue slept for a day and a night. Many things happened in that one day and one night. Xiang Kaiping also gave birth. Coincidentally, she also gave birth to a daughter. He was possessed and did something unforgivable. A moment of impulse led to a long period of regret. But the more he regretted, the more he couldn't reveal it. The more he regretted, the more he couldn't reveal a trace of it. Li Qianxue had heard it from Su Yusin once. But when she heard with her own ears that her husband, the man she loved, had schemed against her like this, she was so angry that her whole body trembled. She could only constantly adjust her breathing to calm herself down. Old Master Li was already stunned. His body was trembling with anger, but he could only cover the position of his heart. "Grandpa. Take care of yourself." Su Yusin immediately stepped forward and supported old Master Li. "Do you want to take a quick-acting heart reliever first?" Old Master Li waved his hand and looked at Su Qinghui in front of him. He was holding a cane in his hand. He suddenly pushed Su Yusin away and raised the cane in his hand. It hit Su Qinghui's shoulder heavily. Su Qinghui's body was hit by such a blow, and he knelt down. But he didn't get up. Old Master Li raised the cane to hit him a second time. Su Qinghui didn't dodge, and took the blow. When Old Master Li was about to hit him for the third time, he staggered and was about to fall back. "Grandpa. Dad." Su Yusin and Li Qianxue stepped forward at the same time to support him and prevent him from falling. Old Master Li pointed at Su Qinghui. He gasped but couldn't say a word. You said 2 words, but you couldn't say a third one." Old Master Li covered the position of his heart, looking as if he couldn't bear it. Su Yusin was anxious. He quickly took the medicine and stuffed it into Old Master Li's mouth. Li Qianxue kept patting his chest. "Dad, calm down. Grandpa, take care of yourself." Old Master Li pointed at Su Qinghui with a trembling hand. He wanted to scold someone, but he couldn't find the words. "Grandpa." Su Yusin's face was full of worry. Li Qianxue was too angry, but she was the calmest one among them. She patted Old Master Li's back to calm him down. "Dad. This thing has happened now. We should think about how to make up for it in the future." Old Master Li spent a lot of effort and finally calmed down a little. He looked at Li Qianxue, his eyes full of guilt. "I hurt you, I hurt my granddaughter. I should have stopped you from marrying him back then. I should have stopped you. Dad." Li Qianxue wanted to cry. She pinched herself hard and shook her head. "Let's not talk about it, okay? We won't talk about the past. We'll think about what to do in the future. Can we? We'll think about how to be good to Qingsang in the future. Can we?" Old Master Li was a man of experience. He nodded and accepted his daughter's suggestion. Okay. Okay. I'll listen to you. I'll listen to you. He could listen to his daughter, but he really couldn't take it. Divorce. I support your divorce. Qianxue. This time, I won't stop you. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.